Chapter 701, a colossal behemoth rended heaven and earth itself, obliterating everything in its path. Even the veteran warriors of Changshu Xianzong and Shuangji Xianmen, accustomed to the fiercest battles, went pale at the sheer terror of its power. Without a second thought for their own sect's sanctity, they spun on their heels and fled. Ye Cheng stood rooted in place as the creature revealed its true form. A dragon, its entire body soot-black, each scale etched with arcane sigils that throbbed with chaotic energy. To behold it was to feel both dread and fascination at once. "This can't be one of the ordinary celestial dragons," he whispered, his voice hushed by awe. "It's a pure-blooded fairy dragon." His heart thundered as he recognized the magnitude of what he faced. Though it had ascended only to the first tier of the golden immortal realm, its bloodline potency was so immense that even masters in the third and fourth tiers would be utterly outmatched. This primeval dragon's destructive force far exceeded any power he had ever encountered. Even that of the purple-gold Swanee he knew he might one day hatch from a divine egg. Ye Cheng watched the dragon's struggle with growing concern. From his vantage point, it was clear the creature was at a serious disadvantage. He narrowed his eyes, activating his divine sense to scan the scene more thoroughly. Sure enough, 3 pursuit squads, each flying swift as arrows, were closing in on the fairy dragon's flank. The sect emblems on their robes left no doubt as to their identity: Tianyue sect, Shenhai Xianzong, and Yuanling Palace. These 3 are recognized as the foremost fairy sects in the Xiaoyao realm, their combined golden immortal elders nearly reaching double digits. Even the Yulong sect pales beside their might. No wonder they had managed to drive this pure-blooded fairy dragon to the brink. Yet, somehow, they still hadn't secured their prize. Ye Cheng shook his head. From what he could see, the 3 heirs, Tianyue's Shengzi, Shenhai's Daozi, and Yuanling's Sheng, were all desperately channeling their forbidden weapons, trying to seal off the dragon's escape routes. Behind them, their sect masters had formed a grand formation, weaving their auras together to bolster each weapon's power. Frankly speaking, without a true golden immortal guiding their assault, such raw force alone would fall short of a guaranteed victory. But even as he assessed their odds, Ye Cheng understood why the sects had risked so much. Capturing a pure-blooded fairy dragon in the golden immortal realm would be a feat sung of for centuries. Still, until a golden immortal showed up, this pursuit was as much a gamble as it was a demonstration of brute strength. And for the dragon, every passing moment brought both hope of escape and the terror of being overwhelmed. Ye Cheng watched from the ridge as the bound immortal dragon thrashed against the 3-sect formation below. Its pure blood strength was draining away with every fierce lunge, and in another month, he was certain, the combined might of the sects would finally bring the beast down. But that fleeting hope came at a terrible price. Wherever the dragon's scorched wings swept the ground, forests turned to ash, and every living creature was reduced to charred ruin. The freewheeling cultivators who made their homes on Qiansheng Mountain had already suffered grievous losses, and more fell each day. The 3 sects' disciples well understood the urgency. In their desperation, many had resorted to the ultimate sacrifice, burning their own blood essence to reinforce the suppression array. Yet rather than pacify the dragon, the ritual only inflamed its fury. The beast's struggles grew wilder, the shockwaves of its rage rippling farther until now the entire Purple Thunder Range trembled on the brink of destruction. "It's hopeless," one disciple whispered, voice cracking. He glanced at his companions, whose faces were ashen. Ye Cheng felt a chill settle in his chest. Even he, a veteran cultivator, could not deny the gravity of their predicament. If the dragon was not subdued soon, there would be nothing left but ruins and sorrow under the thunder-scarred sky. High atop the slopes of the Purple Thunder Mountain Range, the fleeing monks glanced back in horror, regret etched into every face. Even the goddess of the Yuanling Palace, her eyes squeezed shut, could not bear to witness the carnage unfolding below. Then, with a sudden crack of air, all eyes snapped open. Against the retreating crowd and the rampaging pure-blooded fairy dragon, one lone figure charged forward, undaunted. "Who is that? Does he crave death?" One of the 3 great immortal sect masters muttered in disbelief. "Has he gone mad?" Another whispered, eyes wide. The newcomer was none other than Ye Cheng. His dark gaze never wavered as he took in the massive beast before him, a pure-blooded immortal dragon of the golden immortal realm, its scales glittering like molten gold, powerful, feral, and notoriously impossible to tame in its current frenzied state. For Ye Cheng, though, that was precisely the lure he needed. With a deft motion, he drew his sword. Channels of immortal light surged along its blade as he leveled it at the dragon's snarling maw. A pure-blooded golden realm dragon, he mused under his breath. Even maddened, its essence alone is worth a fortune. He paused, smirking at the thought. More valuable than the Swanee god egg in my possession, perhaps. Then, without another word, Ye Cheng unleashed his strike, immortal radiance cleaving toward the beast in a blaze of brilliance. Ye Cheng regarded the pure-blooded immortal dragon with the same ease one might appraise a pile of spirit stones. The dragon's eyes flared with fury at the casual disdain in his gaze. As a golden immortal realm powerhouse, it boasted wisdom and strength far beyond most cultivators. Yet here it was, besieged by the disciples of the three great sects, its back against the wall. Already enraged by its precarious situation, it bristled at this lone nascent immortal, treating it like common prey. With a howl that shook the heavens, the dragon lashed out. Its tail, sleek as polished jade, broad as a mountain ridge, descended in a roaring arc, its force capable of splitting continents. The assembled sect disciples watched in dread. If that blow landed, not a one of them could survive without resorting to forbidden weapons. And yet Ye Cheng stood motionless, arms at his sides, his expression betraying no fear, no intent to draw hidden blades or unleash dark arts. Time seemed to slow as the dragon's tail cleaved the air. No allies, no external aid, just a single young man facing a golden immortal's wrath. Still, in Ye Cheng's calm, unwavering eyes lay a certainty no storm of steel could shake. Either he would break beneath that tail, or he would endure it and emerge victorious. This is nothing short of a death wish. Yet Ye Cheng merely gave a casual, cold smile as the dragon's tail came crashing down. With a barely perceptible flick of his wrist, the Xianxia killing sword leapt from his hand and arced through the air in a graceful, lethal curve. Puff! The sickening crack of bone splintering against steel echoed across the sky. A crimson blossom of blood erupted where the tail had fallen. Far below, the fleeing cultivators of Purple Thunder Mountain froze mid-flight, their hearts pounding as they craned their necks toward the clouds. When they saw the aftermath, their eyes went wide and terror overtook their faces. Behind the fairy dragon, the three great sect masters who had been in hot pursuit ground to a stunned halt. Their gazes met briefly with Ye Cheng's, just as he brought his sword down again. In a final, furious sweep, he severed the dragon's tail completely. Before it could hit the ground, Ye Cheng lifted the massive appendage and slipped it into his storage ring. Aho! The pure-blood fairy dragon let out a roar of disbelief, stunned by both its sudden maiming and the composure of the young man who had done it. Ye Cheng's strength proved awe-inspiring. When his sword sliced through the fairy dragon's tail, the beast didn't so much as flinch until it looked back at him. In that instant, it realized it had struck an unbreakable wall. Its vast body shook violently, and the pure-blooded fairy dragon wheeled about, fleeing straight for the disciples and masters of the three sects. Even if they could have slain it, the dragon preferred their combined wrath to another encounter with Ye Cheng. As it darted past their lines, the sect members watched, both stunned and elated. When they finally turned back to Ye Cheng, fear shone in their eyes. None could fathom how he'd severed a dragon's tail in a single strike. If this was the force behind his blade, even the united might of all three sects would find him a formidable adversary. Fortunately for them, the dragon's blind panic drove it headlong into their waiting encirclement. Now's our chance, a divine opportunity we can't afford to squander. As one, the heirs of the three sects roared, rallying their followers into formation. They intended to close in from all sides and finish off the pure-blood fairy dragon once and for all. But before they could set their plan in motion, a streak of brilliant light cut through the air. Ye Cheng's sword flashed with deadly precision. In a single, effortless stroke, he sliced the pure-blood fairy dragon clean in two. The dragon's severed head and body began to slump toward the ground, but with a flick of his wrist, Ye Cheng guided the head to land neatly beside its tail, denying his enemies even the satisfaction of a spectacular kill. Chapter 702. A deathly quiet fell over the Purple Thunder Mountains. Every cultivator stood rooted to the spot, staring in disbelief at Ye Cheng as he hovered serenely in the air. Their faces had gone ashen, as though they'd just seen a ghost. Even the heirs and masters of the three great sects wore the same stunned expression. None of them had ever imagined that anyone could slay a pure-blood fairy dragon of the Golden Fairy realm with merely 2 swords, and all while manifesting as a celestial fairy. Yes, this dragon had been wounded in their earlier assault, but its true strength remained formidable. Even setting its raw power aside, its cultivation rank alone demanded respect. By all appearances, however, Ye Cheng's own realm barely reached quasi-immortal level. Yet neither the three sects and veterans nor their heirs considered that a plausible explanation. In their eyes, his celestial fairy guise must be a ruse. After all, only a true immortal, or the heir to one, could possibly accomplish such a feat. And even among true immortal heirs, few, if any, would dare to challenge a pure-blood Golden Realm fairy dragon, let alone slay it with 2 blades. As the onlookers exchanged anxious glances, a single, terrifying question echoed in every mind. Who exactly was Ye Cheng? Despite their astonishment at Ye Cheng's display of power, the heirs of the three sects and the masters accompanying them quickly recovered their composure. Wordlessly, they advanced and, in an instant, formed a tight circle around him. Huh? How did this happen? Ye Cheng muttered, astonished by their sudden change in attitude. High atop Purple Thunder Mountain, the other masters, who had just been celebrating their narrow escape, fell silent, their expressions draining of color. They all understood the truth. Had Ye Cheng not stepped in, the three sects' elders would have suffered grievous harm, and even Changshu's saint son and the 3 quasi-saint heirs of the Xianxia immortal sect might have perished under the pure-blood dragon's wrath. Though none of them spoke up, each one felt a deep, unspoken gratitude toward Ye Cheng, the very man who had saved their lives. Now, seeing him surrounded by those he had protected, their indignation flared. None felt it more keenly than Changshu's saint son and the Xianxia quasi-saint heirs, whose anger at this betrayal burned hottest of all. As Ye Cheng found himself besieged, the masters of several sects leapt onto their cloud steeds without a moment's hesitation and formed a protective ring around him. Saint Changshu of the Changshu sect leveled a contemptuous glare at the Shenhai Taoist and hissed, "Taoist of Shenhai, I've always held you in the highest regard. How could you stoop to this?" Saint Yuanling, standing at his side, added sharply, "That's right. If it weren't for Brother Ye Cheng's timely intervention, you'd have walked straight into a grave mistake, and now you would besiege him." Behind them, the 3 quasi-saints of Shuangji Xianmen spoke up in unison, their voices echoing across the misty plateau. The young heirs of the allied sects shrank back, faces flushed with shame, but the senior elders remained unmoved, their expressions as dark as thunderclouds. "Saint Changshu, quasi-saint of Shuangji," one elder snapped, voice cold and authoritative. "This matter concerns only our 3 sects. Do not meddle." He paused to let his words hang in the charged air, then shifted his gaze to Ye Cheng. A cruel smile curved his lips. "Tell me, what price have our 3 sects paid to slay a pure-blooded fairy dragon? No matter how you spin it, we refuse to let this brat walk away with our prize." At that, the wind stilled, and all eyes fell on Ye Cheng, who stood his ground beneath the gathering storm of eyes and blades. The courtyard fell silent as the elders of Yuanling Palace, Tianyue sect, and Shenhai Dao sect rose in unison. The oldest among them, a tall figure in flowing white robes, stepped forward, his voice cool and authoritative. "My friend, we all recognize your extraordinary talent and strength, but you can't simply claim every last one of these pure-blood fairy dragons today." Another elder chimed in, his tone equally imperious. "At the very least, you'll hand over 70% of them." 70%, no less, a third added, folding his arms. Their gazes swept over Changshu Shengzi and his companions as if daring them to object. The first elder continued, voice laced with warning. "Changshu Shengzi, you do well to consider whether it's worth offending the 3 great immortal sects for the sake of this friend of yours." Changshu Shengzi's face drained of color. He and his fellow disciples deeply respected Ye Cheng and admitted he was more than a match for most, but they were at best saints or quasi-saints. They lacked the clout of a sect master, and the foundations of Yuanling Palace, Tianyue sect, and Shenhai Dao sect were leagues beyond those of Changshu Immortal sect and Shuangji Immortal Gate. If they crossed these three powers, word would reach back to their own elders, and their hard-earned positions as saint disciples could be in jeopardy. Noticing the stark change in the younger saints' expressions, the three elder masters exchanged satisfied smiles. Their challenge had been issued, and for now, they had the upper hand. Elders of the sect fell silent, all eyes fixed on Ye Cheng. Their steely gazes were heavy with unspoken demands. "Elder, please don't be so harsh." Tianyue Shengzi interjected at last, sensing the growing tension. He gestured for the senior disciples to step back, then turned to Ye Cheng with a respectful bow and a salute. "Brother Taoist, though I don't yet know your name, I greatly admire your valor today. Your sword stroke that felled the immortal dragon was nothing short of legendary." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Still, as our elders have pointed out, you did not face that fairy dragon entirely alone. It would be excessive for one man to claim the entire prize." Tianyue Shengzi's eyes met Ye Cheng's. "So here's our proposal. Rather than the 70-30 split my elders suggested, we'll share the spoils evenly. 50% for our three sects, and 50% to you alone. Does that sound fair, Brother Taoist?" At this, Changshu Shengzi and the other senior disciples exchanged relieved glances. This new division was far more generous than the elders' original demand, and Tianyue Shengzi's tone was infinitely more gracious. Changshu Saint and the others exchanged uneasy looks as they watched Ye Cheng. He merely gave them a cold smile and said, "I delivered the final blow to that pure-blood fairy dragon. It's my spoil." Tianyue Saint bristled. "And what about our contributions?" With a faint, almost amused tilt of his head, Ye Cheng replied, "Even if none of you had joined in, I still could have taken it down." His tone was so composed it sounded like an indisputable fact. Fury flared in Tianyue Saint's eyes. "Brother, you're going too far." "Exactly," Yuanling Saint added, stepping forward. "Tianyue Saint holds you in high regard and has already conceded a great deal. It's time you stopped." Changshu Saint and his companions fell silent. They had witnessed Ye Cheng's strike. There was no doubt he'd slain the dragon himself. But none of them had believed he had the power to finish it off unassisted, especially without their preemptive attacks to weaken it. Now, awkwardly, they stood by, unsure how to support him. Meanwhile, the three sect masters shared confident, knowing looks, certain that their assessment had been proven right. The elders of the three sects spoke up at once. "Sacred son, sacred daughter, don't waste your breath on him." A celestial immortal elder stepped forward, his gaze locked onto Ye Cheng with open hostility. "Let me make this perfectly clear," he said, his tone low and dangerous. "Our three sects have descended on Thousand Saints Mountain for one goal, to seize that pure-blooded immortal dragon." He rested a hand on the hilt of his sword. "We're more than just a small expeditionary force. Over 100 celestial immortals have already made their way inside these mountains. We're simply the vanguard. Behind us waits a vast host. If you don't know when you're beaten, we won't hesitate to capture you, and then take the dragon by force." Over 100 celestial immortals? Ye Cheng's heart skipped a beat. He had just witnessed the overwhelming power wielded by the three major sects, power no lone golden immortal could match against this pure-blooded dragon. But an entire legion of celestial immortals, united in purpose. His mind raced, searching for a way to turn the odds back in his favor. Thousand Saints Mountain was notorious for its savage beasts, far too dangerous and slow to clear single-handed. Ye Cheng surveyed the three sects' disciples standing before him. He sensed that their initial hesitation was giving way to something else, eagerness. "My friend," the celestial elder of the Azure sect spoke first, studying Ye Cheng's expression. "Have you reached a decision?" Ye Cheng let a small, confident smile cross his lips. "I have." With that, he swept his hand through the air. A booming clap of thunder echoed as the legendary 33 Days Immortal formation blossomed into existence overhead. Brilliant runes and swirling lights coalesced into a dome that instantly enclosed the three sect elders and their disciples. Under the spellbound gazes of the assembled masters, Ye Cheng's voice rang out. For the next 2 months, you 3 sects will remain by my side. Together, we'll hunt down every monster lurking in these mountains. Shock and awe rippled through the ranks of elders and students alike. None could deny the power of the immortal formation, and none could refuse Ye Cheng's command. Chapter 703. High above the clouds, the 33 Heavens immortal formation thrummed with devastating power. Its oppressive aura pressed down on everyone below, the disciples of the 3 sects and the celestial masters who had accompanied them. Each breathed shallowly, faces drawn tight with fear. Even the boldest among them dared not utter a single word. None would risk provoking this deadly array. They all felt it, a premonition of instant annihilation if they made so much as the wrong move. A calm voice echoed from within the formation. "Don't be afraid to back down if you wish," it said. The descendants of the 3 sects glanced upward, seeking the speaker. "Your reinforcements will arrive in half a day," he continued. "I'll wait here. When your troops arrive, you may join them. After that, we'll resume our duel." From somewhere deep inside the formation, the man known as Ye Cheng stepped forward. He reached into his robes, withdrew a jade storage ring, and let it hover in midair. Inside, a coiled iridescent shape revealed itself, the pure-blooded fairy dragon. Ye Cheng's lips curved into a playful smile as he held the ring aloft, meeting the anxious gazes of the 3 sects masters. Then he settled back into the formation's center, confident and unbowed, prepared to wait the promised half-day. "If you win, this pure-blooded fairy dragon is yours. I have no use for it," Ye Cheng declared, his gaze unwavering. "But if you lose, you'll owe me 2 months of monster hunting service. Do you dare to bet?" A stunned silence fell over the courtyard. Even Xianxia's face went pale. He wanted to step forward and warn Ye Cheng. The 3 great immortal sects could easily muster over 100 celestial masters into a fearsome battle formation. No matter how talented Ye Cheng was, a solo duel against a pure-blood fairy dragon would be manageable. But facing a united front of 100 immortal cultivators, retreat would be his only option. Before Xianxia could intervene, the gathered heirs of the 3 sects, led by Tianyue's Holy Son, leapt at the challenge. "It's a bet," the Holy Son said with a triumphant grin. "We'll reconvene in half a day to settle this." Beside him, the Taoist son of Shenhai and the goddess of Yuanling nodded eagerly. In their eyes, Ye Cheng's audacity was as exhilarating as the challenge itself. Ye Cheng had just handed over a pure-blooded fairy dragon to the 3 sects, on the house. "The Holy Son of Yulong is undeniably talented and powerful," he remarked coolly, "but he's still young and short on real battle experience." The senior celestials from the 3 sects exchanged knowing smiles, each secretly relieved. In their eyes, Ye Cheng must have witnessed their combined efforts fail to fell the fairy dragon, and then seen how effortlessly he'd taken control of the situation. No doubt, he now looked down on them as inept. What Ye Cheng didn't realize was that the 3 sects never truly pooled their strength in the first place. When they confronted the pure-blooded fairy dragon, each sect formed its own death array, over 100 celestial masters apiece, yet they fought as 3 separate forces. The dragon, by contrast, fought within a single, perfectly coordinated killing array of a comparable size. That consolidation of power made all the difference. Fragmented against a unified front, the sect's combined might simply wasn't enough. Sun Chongshu pressed his lips together. Brother Ye Cheng really is headed for a crushing defeat this time. He and the 3 junior disciples of Shuangji Xianmen exchanged grim glances. So far, the conflict with Ye Cheng hadn't crossed the line into outright bloodshed. Both sides still showed enough restraint to avoid lethal force. Even if Ye Cheng lost decisively, his life wouldn't be at risk. That was the consensus among Chongshu, Shengzi, and the various masters gathered at Purple Thunder Mountain. Yet half a day later, that cautious equilibrium shattered. At the summit of Heavenly Peak, the leaders of the 3 great sects bled in a single circle. Their youngest heirs, proud, unyielding, and unwilling to back down, took command. As they stepped forward in unison, hundreds of cultivators formed ranks behind them, chanting in low, harmonic tones. In an instant, the air above the plateau glittered with sword lights and the hum of condensed spirit energy. A colossal formation coalesced, scales of iridescent blue and silver weaving together like living flesh. It's a golden immortal level array. Someone gasped. The Shenhai Konglong Formation. The name snapped through the crowd. Sea of Heaven, Hidden Dragon Formation. It was one of Shenhai Dao Sect's most fearsome secret techniques, capable of overwhelming even top-tier adversaries. Sun Chongshu felt a chill in his spine as the spectral dragon's head reared skyward, jaws opening to unleash a roar of pure spiritual force. He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. Beside him, Shuangji's junior disciples paled, their earlier confidence drained away. Chongshu sighed softly. All right, there's no backing down now. Master Shenhai of the Shenhai sect, along with the two heirs of the allied schools, gazed down at Ye Cheng, their eyes brimming with confidence. Bathed in the power of the Shenhai Azure Dragon Formation, Shenhai felt utterly invincible. Yulong disciple, he called, his voice echoing through the swirling energies. It's not too late to bow out. Our original agreement still stands. You take 50% of the Dragon Spirit's treasures, and the three of us will divide the remainder. He inhaled deeply, fixing Ye Cheng with a triumphant stare. But Ye Cheng only offered a faint, defiant smile. In one smooth motion, he lifted his primordial slaughter sword, letting the blade's cold gleam speak for him. Stubborn brat, Shenhai snarled. Let him learn that the combined might of our three sects cannot be toppled by one lone youth. At his command, the three sect leaders embedded within the formation roared in unison. Nearby, Tianyue Saintborn and the Yuanling goddess exchanged helpless shakes of the head. Then, together, they shouted, "Break the formation!" Far below, in the heart of the Purple Thunder Range, tens of thousands of cultivators watched in awe as the clash of wills and powers began to unfold. Shenhai Konglong thundered in rage as it lunged straight at Ye Cheng. In the next breath, its world-shattering claws were bearing down on him. Crack! A sharp, resonant snap split the air. Under the astonished eyes of the onlookers, the 33-day immortal formation materialized behind Ye Cheng, suffusing him with divine power. His aura flared to life. With a single, fluid motion, Ye Cheng swung his sword at the charging azure dragon. In one clean stroke, he sheared through its mighty claws, and then tore the entire azure dragon formation asunder. Hundreds of celestial warriors tumbled from their high vantage points, plummeting into the clouds below. They stared up at him, their faces pale with dread. A voice quivered through the chaos. Now, will you honor your wager? That day, Xianxia Mountain reeled in disbelief. Never before had its three greatest golden immortal sects, the Tianyue sect, the Shenhai sect, and the Yuanling Palace, faced such overwhelming power from a single opponent. News of Ye Cheng's astounding victory spread across Xianxia Mountain like wildfire. He had single-handedly subdued 100 celestial disciples, among them leading saints and goddesses from the three great immortal sects, and reduced them to his personal laborers, forcing them to clear every corner of the small realm. At first, no one believed such an audacious tale. They say Ye Cheng actually humbled all three great immortal sects by himself? Impossible. Who'd dare to spread this rumor? You'd have to be mad to anger those sects, especially once they return to the Xiaoyao world. And the Yuanling goddess, one of the 10 heavenly fairies of the younger generation, using her like a common laborer, he'll be hunted down for sure. Scholars sneered, and noble scions rolled their eyes. But day after day, Ye Cheng emerged from the mountain accompanied by defeated disciples of the three sects. Under his command, they hunted and slaughtered demon beasts in sight. Witnesses repeatedly confirmed the same impossible truth. One man had truly overcome all three great immortal sects and bent their heirs to his will. The doubts at last fell silent. Whispers gave way to astonishment, and then to undeniable belief. He really did it, someone muttered. My young master's messenger arrived just now. He says that Ye Cheng was seen outside Yuhantan under the command of a white-robed sword immortal. Together, they drove out dozens of heavenly spirit beasts holed up in the valley and killed them all. Unbelievable, another voice chimed in. Just days ago, I watched with my own eyes as the Yuanling goddess walked at that sword immortal's side like a servant, pouring wine for him as if she were his maid. It was blasphemy. Who is this sword immortal anyway? A third scoffed. He behaves as if the laws of heaven and man mean nothing to him. He's a menace to our Xiaoyao world and ought to be executed on sight. Is there no one who can rein him in?" A scoffing laugh cut through the circle. Even the 3 sect masters were cowed beneath his blade and forced into service. "What chance have we of stopping him? You, perhaps?" A long silence followed, broken only by an envious sigh. "I envy him so much." Across Xianxia Mountain, that single conversation spread like wildfire. Masters from every sect stared at one another in stunned disbelief, or seethed with unease. They had always known Ye Cheng was extraordinary, but to submit so humbly to a mysterious sword immortal, to slay peerless monsters at his bidding, this was a story none of them would soon forget. "Could you please provide the full chapter text you'd like revised? Once I have the complete content, I'll rewrite it into clear, natural English, renaming Gu Changqing to Ye Cheng and ensuring his character is consistently male." Chapter 704. I can't believe the Nether Palace goddess could ever be subdued and reduced to someone's maid. Under the dim glow of lanterns in the Yulong sect camp, Shen Yue repeated the astonishing rumor she'd overheard that morning. Across the Xiaoyao realm, gossip buzzed that the illustrious goddess of the Nether Palace, pride of the golden immortal sects, had fallen from her throne and was now in servitude to some mysterious swordsman. Yulong sect might not rival the absolute power of Azure Cloud Palace or Xuanyuan Manor, but it counted among the realm's greatest golden immortal sects. As one of its brightest talents, Shenyue had once been privileged to train alongside, and even spar with, peers from the top sects. She still remembered the goddess's imperious grace, like a snow lotus untouched by worldly dust. And yet here, high on the snowy cliffs of Thousand Saints Mountain, that same celestial flower was said to have been plucked from her pedestal and forced into maid's rags. Shen Yue felt a pang of sorrow and indignation, but what weighed most heavily on her mind was the identity of the man who dared challenge all 3 great sects and even bring down their guardian masters in a single stroke. Who was this enigmatic swordsman? And what could he want with the once unassailable goddess of the Nether Palace? Several disciples of the Yulong sect stood in silent awe, eyes fixed on the white-robed swordsman who had just bested the masters of all 3 rival sects. One of them finally broke the hush. To hold his own against 3 sect leaders, he must be the scion of a hidden true immortal. Whispers of envy and admiration rippled through the group. In the Xiaoyao realm, the true immortal tier is the highest echelon any cultivator can hope to attain. Hidden true immortals are legends whispered in every monastery and mountain pass, beings of such loftiness that mere mortals dare only to bow in reverence and never to imagine sharing their glory. Even Shen Yue, the proud holy son of the Yulong sect, felt his heart skip a beat. As they exchanged hushed commentary, all eyes stole furtive glances at Ye Cheng's spirit projection. The young man in white carried himself with an elegance and power that only deepened their envy. Yet none dared speak too harshly of him. After all, a true immortal's descendant commands respect. Still, Shen Yue would not be outdone in spirit. Inwardly, he reminded himself, our sect may not boast a hidden true immortal in our lineage, but that does not mean the Holy Sun's strength is any less. Though unspoken, his companions harbored the same thought. And so, throughout this expedition and hunt, admiration and rivalry walked hand in hand, each youth wondering, in his own heart, whether the Yulong sect's holy son might yet prove himself a match for the legendary heir in white. Thanks to Ye Cheng's protection, the party's haul from Thousand Saints Mountain far exceeded anything they dared to hope for. Everything they'd gained, every treasure, every scrap of knowledge was owed to him. As a result, their reluctance toward the Holy Sun had completely vanished, replaced by genuine awe and devotion. Just then, a lone figure appeared along the mountain path. It was Ye Shu, who had gone ahead to scout. Seeing her return, Shenyue and the others hurried forward to meet her. "Sister Ye Shu, what did you find? Any monsters lying in wait?" Shenyue asked anxiously. Ye Shu shook her head, but her voice sounded strangely distant. "There aren't many creatures up ahead. We don't need to waste time here." She seemed distracted, answering Shenyue's questions almost absent-mindedly. Shenyue frowned. "Yeshu, is everything all right?" Yeshu drew a steadying breath, but she refused to meet Shenyue's eyes. Instead, her gaze fixed on Ye Cheng's avatar. When she spoke again, Her voice trembled ever so slightly. "It's Ye Cheng. There's something about him I can't shake." Yeshu's voice trembled as he bowed before the throne. "Your Highness, while I was exploring beyond the outer gates today, I met a band of travelers who brought troubling news. They claim the white-robed Sword Immortal is carrying the token of our Jade Dragon sect's holy son." I felt my heart skip a beat. Swallowing hard, I steeled myself and met Ye Cheng's unflinching gaze. "Your Highness," I ventured, "do you believe this rumor to be true?" A hush fell over the hall. Xianxia and the other disciples exchanged startled glances, their faces pale with shock. None of them could have imagined the rumor spreading so swiftly. Barely days had passed since the encounter, yet the entire sect was whispering about it. Ye Cheng rose from his seat, the lantern light glinting off his porcelain skin. He folded his hands behind his back and nodded once, decisively. Though his expression remained composed, a flicker of helplessness passed through his dark eyes. He had hoped to contain the news of the Sword Immortal's token, but now there was no denying it. Yeshu let out a long, shuddering breath, as though he had been holding it inside for hours. I understand, Your Highness," he managed, his words barely above a whisper. Ye Cheng inclined his head in acknowledgement. Silence enveloped the hall as every pair of eyes turned to him, waiting for his next command. The weight of unspoken questions hung heavy in the air, questions only he could answer. Xianxia forced herself to steady her nerves and stagger back to camp, determined to learn what had happened. When the answer finally came, a clear confirmation of success, she felt as though a massive boulder had been lifted from her chest. Relief gave way to a rush of astonishment so intense it left her momentarily breathless. Unlike Yeshu's overt display of shock, Xianxia and the other onlookers only stood there in stunned silence, their heads buzzing as if they'd woken from a dream. All this time, they had followed Ye Cheng and seen him perform unbelievable feats. They'd believed in his talent, perhaps even thought they'd overestimated him. Yet now they realized with humbled awe that they had still underestimated the depths of his power. Could this truly be the prodigy everyone speaks of? They whispered among themselves. But Ye Cheng paid no mind to their speculation. At that very moment, he was marshalling the masters of the three sects, newly united under his command, to sweep the Xianxia Mountain's small world for any lingering threats. With over 100 celestial cultivators mobilized, his monster-hunting force moved with unprecedented speed and coordination, each victory fueling the next and cementing Ye Cheng's reputation as a force none could ignore. This haul dwarfs anything Ye Cheng could have managed on his own. Acting solo, he might slay a dozen celestial beasts in a single area before the others scattered into the wilderness, never daring to linger. But with the combined might of the three sects' masters and over 100 immortals at his back, he can seal off an entire region, drive the monsters into a corner, and pick them off at will. No creature can flee. Every escape route is cut off, and they can only press against his lines until they fall. Ye Cheng is generous with his allies. After each victory, he divides the monster spoils evenly, half to himself, half to the three sects. It's a small token of appreciation for their help in the field. Yet the scions of those sects, Tianyue Shengzi, Yuanling Shennu, and the rest, can't help but sneer at such meager rewards. Pride stings, and their lips curl at the thought of splitting those precious materials. Still, none of them dares to challenge him. They witnessed firsthand how effortlessly Ye Cheng shattered the Shenhai Kanglong formation with a single strike of his sword. Since then, every order he issues is met with instant obedience, no matter how quietly resentment simmers beneath their bows. As time passed, nobody hesitated anymore to follow Ye Cheng's lead. The young disciples of the three sects, and the immortals assigned to guide them, soon realized that traveling under his command had its advantages. Though his promised share of the spoils was modest, it hardly slowed him down. Every demon he felled added to their collective bounty. Bit by bit, the rewards mounted. A month later, the sect representatives convened to tally their gains. To everyone's astonishment, the elixirs, rare reagents, and other mystical materials they'd gathered dwarfed the targets they'd set upon entering Xianxia Mountain. At this rate, only another month remained before the mountain closed to outsiders. and even if they failed to secure a single sample from the pure-blood immortal dragon, the dividends from Ye Cheng's hunts would not only cover that loss, but exceed it by far. This Ye Cheng, one of the disciples whispered, is he really the holy son of the Yulong sect? With his strength and that formidable swordsmanship, another replied, eyes wide, could anyone doubt he was trained by the Yulong sect's finest? Even if old Taoist Huanglong managed to burn every ancestral tomb of the Yulong sect's past masters, he still might not succeed where even the Supreme Celestial failed. The three sect leaders exchanged uneasy glances. Behind them, their disciples had been quietly tallying last month's monster hunting rewards, and after a moment's hesitation, they reached a decision of their own. Our 3 jade talismans contain every scrap of intelligence we've gathered on Xianxia Mountain, the Yuanling goddess announced, her silver-white teeth flashing as she stepped forward and laid the talismans before Ye Cheng. Brother Dao, no, your highness, she corrected herself with a pained grimace. The 2 holy sons flanking her shot each other annoyed looks. Ye Cheng's own expression flickered between amusement and bewilderment. He knew full well that with these talismans in hand, his efficiency on Xianxia Mountain would skyrocket and his spoils multiply. Originally, he'd planned to interrogate them thoroughly to extract this very information. Yet here they were, offering it up freely. And what on earth did your highness imply? Ye Cheng suppressed a wry smile. He reached out, accepted the 3 gleaming jade tablets, and fixed his gaze on the Yuanling goddess. You've all done well, he said quietly. Your contributions will be remembered. Now, tell me everything you know about Xianxia Mountain. Are you 3 finally admitting that you're my followers? Ye Cheng asked with a grin. In Xianxia Mountain, and only here, the Yuanling goddess snapped, grinding her teeth in mock ferocity. That was our deal. Don't read anything more into it. Ye Cheng laughed and dropped the teasing. He accepted the 3 jade talismans they presented and led the small alliance deeper into the mountain. Over the past month, with the combined strength and resources of the 3 sects at his back, their hunting yields had soared. These materials alone, see here, the pure-blood fairy dragon fangs and scales. If we tally everything, this haul must be worth at least 50,000 crystals, Ye Cheng marveled, rifling through the bundles of spirit stones and rare beast parts. Together, they had dispatched more than 1,000 fairy beasts and countless lesser spirits. Ye Cheng's satisfaction was plain to see as he stacked the last of the loot. When the time came to depart, he picked a random cavern exit. Emerging into the crisp air, he joined the 3 sect masters on the grassy plateau overlooking Xianxia Mountain. Below them, at each exit gate, the clans and sect support teams who had sent those masters into the mountain were waiting, shouts of greeting and congratulatory cheers rising from the assembled crowds. With a satisfied nod, Ye Cheng shouldered his pack. Their lucrative expedition was over, but the real rewards, the new alliances and the reputation he'd forged were only just beginning. The mood among the gathered masters had turned oddly tense. From time to time, each of them glanced up into the sky, surprise flickering in their eyes. High above the clouds hovered 3 detachments, 6 golden immortals in all, each pair standing sentient over a vast stretch of land below. Through the aid of powerful spirit tools, their divine awareness spread out across 100,000 miles of mountains and rivers, ready to detect and instantly snuff out the slightest movement when any exit from Xianxia Mountain should open. These 6 figures were no minor enforcers, but the true scions of Xiaoyao Realm's greatest golden immortal sects, Shenhai Xianzong, Tianyou Men, and Yuanling Palace. Their arrival made the old rumors suddenly seem all but certain, 80% likelihood if the whispers were to be believed. As the cultivators exchanged uneasy glances, each saw the same shock mirrored in their neighbors' eyes. Not long ago, word had filtered through Xianxia Mountain of reinforcements on the way. Yet nobody had expected such formidable allies to appear so swiftly. The scions of the 3 sects, along with their masters who had dared to venture onto Xianxia Mountain, were utterly overwhelmed by a lone, enigmatic sword immortal, Ye Cheng. Rumor had it he'd reduced them to little more than laborers, driving them like coolies. News of this astonishing defeat spread like wildfire through the world of Xiaoyao, and at first many laughed it off. But as cultivators climbed into the clouds and beheld the scene for themselves, scoffs gave way to stunned silence and growing disbelief. Who was this prodigy who'd trounced the heirs of 3 great sects and laid low hundreds of celestial immortals in a single stroke? Even as awe gripped their hearts, onlookers agreed on one thing. Whoever Ye Cheng was, his victory wouldn't come without a price. He could not emerge from this unscathed. Just as the crowd whispered its grim predictions, the mountain itself answered. With a low rumble, hidden gates yawned open beneath the rolling mists, and every pair of eyes turned to the twin portals of Xianxia Mountain. "They're coming out!" someone cried, and the throng fell into tense, breathless silence. Chapter 705. Below the sea of clouds lay a vast mountain lake, its placid surface ringed by towering peaks. At the very moment the gateway to Xianxia Mountain reopened, more than a dozen swirling vortexes materialized above the water. Through these portals emerged squads of cultivators. Some stepped forth with triumphant smiles, their hauls of spirit treasures and rare herbs attesting to a bountiful harvest. Others wore discouraged expressions, clearly disappointed by scant gains. Yet even they were luckier than the ill-fated souls still trapped within Xianxia's pocket realm, now nothing more than sustenance for its monstrous inhabitants. Regardless of joy or regret, every returning master shared one unwavering reaction, as Ye Cheng led the combined disciples of the 3 sects and the monks of the Yulong sect through the last vortex. Over the past 2 months on Xianxia Mountain, they had all witnessed his strategic genius, how he marshaled sect elders into coordinated hunts, turned desperate skirmishes into swift victories, and repeatedly saved lives with his calm decisiveness. That image of Ye Cheng, undaunted, unerring, had seared itself into their memories. Now, as they hovered above the lake, the countless cultivators bowed their heads in awe, for Ye Cheng's leadership had not only ensured their safe return, but had rewritten what they believed possible atop Xianxia Mountain. They could all feel it. The immortal qi beyond Xianxia Mountain was far thinner than what they'd grown used to. Every one of these senior cultivators understood the unspoken truth. Once Ye Cheng left the safety of the mountain, he'd be vulnerable. Whispers rippled through the gathered crowd. The Tianyue sect, the Shenhai sect, Yuanling Palace, none of them are to be underestimated. To have Saint Yulong daring to give orders to the heirs of those 3 great sects, he's practically painted a target on his back. I wouldn't be surprised if one of those sect leaders swoops in and arrests him. And don't forget the fallout for the Yulong sect itself, someone added, voice low. They'll all be implicated. Alongside their awe and fear, a flicker of regret passed through many eyes as they turned toward Ye Cheng's position. In that instant, they saw 3 figures moving together. Ye Cheng in the lead, with the Tianyue saint's son at his side and the graceful Yuanling goddess close behind. The sight stole their breaths, so perfectly aligned with the rumors that had been whispered for weeks. An ancient immortal sucked in a startled breath and murmured, "So the rumors were true after all." Many young prodigies who had never set foot on Xianxia Mountain hurried here at the slightest whisper that their cherished Yuanling goddess had been subdued and enslaved. Under the guidance of their clan and sect elders, they all came, some out of genuine concern, most determined to expose what they were certain was a baseless rumor. 99% of them had already decided that once the rumor was disproved, they'd return home, drag the rumor monger to justice, and preserve the goddess's spotless reputation. But now, as they laid eyes on the figure standing beside Ye Cheng, their confidence shattered. This young woman looked less like a transcendent deity and more like a lowly maid. No trace remained of the lofty, ice-white snow lotus beauty they had imagined in their dreams. Envy and disbelief flickered in their eyes, so fierce it was as if they would spew flames. One by one, they muttered under their breath, "Yulong Divine Son." The winds coursing through the sea of clouds carried the fierce cries of the young Tianjiao so violently that the very mountains below seemed on the verge of shattering. Yet though all the aspiring heroes of the Xiaoyao realm felt pressure in that surging tumult, none were more ill at ease than the members of the Yulong sect gathered there. The Yulong delegation had arrived in full force to escort Ye Cheng and the other sect disciples back home. Their compliment was nothing short of impressive. I've heavenly immortal ranked elders, and even golden immortal Yuying herself had been dispatched. None of this was by chance. It was the plan of sect leader Mu Qing to show the world that Yulong's prodigies were not to be trifled with. Whispers, however, had been spreading through the martial world. The son of Yulong crushed the heirs of the three great sects. From Mu Qing down to the most junior disciple, left behind at the sect's heart, everyone scoffed at such slanders. Mu Qing had already assigned trusted investigators to unmask the rumor-mongers. How dare anyone sully Yulong's honor, and dare bring ruin upon the sect? The Yulong masters, with their heads held high, were determined that the truth would emerge victorious. Mu Qing had been adamant. After the defiling of the Yulong sect, they couldn't take any chances. For their safety, she ordered Golden Immortal Elder Yueying to lead 5 Celestial Immortal Elders in guarding Xianxia Mountain and protecting Ye Cheng and his fellow disciples. Yet now, as Yueying stood on the peak, she saw Ye Cheng himself striding down the slopes, flanked by an astonishing host of over 100 cultivators, including 3 scions from a major sect. Yueying and her Celestial Immortal Elders exchanged disbelieving glances. Did this holy son really need their protection when he could command such a force on his own? Before they could gather their wits, word of Ye Cheng's procession reached the Sea of Clouds, where the senior immortals from the 3 foremost sects, Tianyue sect among them, were observing. They watched in stunned silence as their own saint sons and celestial maidens, once expected to lead, now looked like mere attendants trailing behind Ye Cheng's entourage. Even these exalted elders felt their hearts tighten with unease. How had one young disciple come to overshadow them all? A thunderous voice cut through the air, and in the next instant a colossal pressure bore down from the heavens above the Sea of Clouds. Every cultivator present reeled, struggling to stay on their feet as the oppressive aura washed over them. "Saint Disciple Yulong," the immortal bellowed, "release my disciple this instant, and come up here and apologize." Those nearest the roar felt it in their bones, their hearts pounding. A few bristled at the outrage, hands twitching toward their weapons. But when they caught sight of the banners of Tianyue sect, Shenhai Dao sect, and Yuanling Palace billowing behind the speaker, anger was swiftly replaced by caution, and then curiosity. All eyes turned to Ye Cheng, who stood at the center of the storm. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Tianyue sect, Shenhai Dao sect, and Yuanling Palace united against one boy. When have we ever seen such gall? Gall indeed. I've never witnessed the 3 great sects collaborate just to settle a score with a single young genius. He's undeniably talented, someone conceded, but it seems his fortune has run out today. Nods and sympathetic shakes of the head passed from elder to junior. In every mind, the same conclusion took shape. Ye Cheng was in far over his head, and the pressure closing in on him was only just beginning. The assembled cultivators brimmed with anticipation, eager for the 3 sects' golden immortal patriarchs to descend and take action. They whispered among themselves that nothing short of killing the insolent upstart who dared slander their goddess would satisfy them. Even the elders of the Yulong sect, who had come to support Ye Cheng, found themselves momentarily paralyzed by the sudden appearance of 6 golden immortals hovering overhead. Yueying, too, blinked in disbelief. Then, steeling himself despite his own misgivings about confronting such formidable figures, he clenched his teeth. In an instant, his form blurred and reappeared before Ye Cheng, placing himself squarely between his lord and the golden immortals. "This is," one of the Yulong elders murmured, watching Yueying's defiant stand. The others, who had begun to fall back, exchanged resigned glances and followed his lead, closing ranks to shield Ye Cheng. Taking a steadying breath, Yueying lifted his gaze to the foremost golden immortal, Luo Ming, who hovered with an imperious air. "Golden Immortal Luo Ming," he called out, voice clear and controlled, "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. I won't entertain your excuses." Luo Ming's reply thundered through the air, cutting Yueying off. "Let your holy son come forward and explain himself in person." Golden Immortal Luo Ming's face darkened as he abruptly cut off Elder Yueying's words. The sudden rudeness startled her. Although the Yulong sect wasn't as powerful as the Tianyue or the other three major sects, it was still a first-tier Golden Immortal sect, and her own strength rivaled Luo Ming's. Yet here she was, forced into silence. With 5 Golden Immortals standing firmly behind Luo Ming, Yue could only grit her teeth and endure the insult. Just as she opened her mouth to speak again, Ye Cheng stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Elder Yue, please stand back," he said in a low, steady voice. "I'll handle this." He spoke calmly, though inside he burned with indignation. He hadn't expected that, despite his recent provocations against the 3 Golden Immortal sects, Yue and the others would so staunchly defend him. Their loyalty meant more than he could say, but he could not bear to watch his elder humiliated. Guiding Yue behind him, Ye Cheng squared his shoulders and faced Luo Ming without a trace of fear. Yue struggled to pull away, but the power in Ye Cheng's grip was overwhelming. She couldn't move an inch. Before she could even think, he'd spun her behind him. "You." Her heart skipped a beat. Staring at his back, she felt her throat go dry. How had Ye Cheng managed to subdue the 3 sects' strongest disciples so effortlessly? Had he lured monsters into the fray, then turned their power against the cultivators? Or possessed some hidden, forbidden weapon, unknown even to her and senior sister Mu Qing, an external artifact capable of suppressing the rival heirs? She raced through every wild theory she could imagine, but one idea never crossed her mind because it sounded downright impossible, that Ye Cheng had done it purely by his own strength. And yet, as he gave her another gentle shove, that most unlikely explanation suddenly felt like the only one that made sense. Chapter 706. Yue's heart skipped a beat. Behind Ye Cheng, the young heirs of the 3 great sects, who had until now been cowering under everyone's stares, finally found their courage. At the cold gleam in Ye Cheng's eyes, they no longer hesitated. The Taoist of Shenhai and the goddess of Yuanling each seized one of his arms, while the holy son of Tianyu lifted his radiant divine rainbow and surged toward Elder Luo Ming of the Tianyue sect. "Elder Luo, please don't act rashly. This has nothing to do with brother Ye Cheng," he called out, voice ringing across the courtyard. "He and I bear no enmity. Those rumors are baseless. We're close allies." He turned to the gathering elders and deacons. "If you doubt us, ask anyone who's traveling with us." His words fell like a hammer blow. In an instant, the entire assembly fell silent. The martial heroes of the Xiaoyao realm exchanged glances, first at the holy son of Tianyue, then at the unperturbed calm on Ye Cheng's face, and finally at the 3 sect heirs now standing firmly at his side. Not a whisper stirred in the still air. Doubt flickered in their eyes. What was happening? How had this turned into cooperation again? "All along, we thought the heirs of the 3 great sects were suppressed," one master whispered. "Those 3 earlier looked utterly overpowered. Why on earth is the heir of Heavenly Peak siding with Ye Cheng now? Have we gotten this all wrong?" Among the assembled cultivators, only those who'd actually witnessed the episode on Xianxia Mountain dared to speak out. They were aghast at the display before them. Cooperation? Hardly. On Xianxia Mountain, the leaders of the 3 sects had been reduced to Ye Cheng's playthings, forced to obey his every command. It had been one-sided exploitation, pure and simple, not any kind of mutual alliance. As reality set in, their shock deepened. Even casual onlookers knew the heir of Heavenly Peak was twisting the truth. He couldn't possibly have forgotten how badly he'd been humiliated, dominated, and driven around like a puppet. Yet there he stood, calling it cooperation. He'd swallowed his pride and endured every indignity rather than break all ties with Ye Cheng. And that, more than anything, left everyone feeling a chill of horror. This could only mean one thing. To the Saint Son of Heavenly Peak, the divine Si Daozi, and the goddess of Yuanling, severing ties with Ye Cheng would bring consequences so terrible that none of the 3 major sects could afford them. "Who is this Ye Cheng, anyway? Just a jade dragon disciple," murmured the assembled elders. But once they grasped the truth of his status, their astonishment only grew. High above on the sea of clouds, the gathered masters watched intently. The bond between their own saint son and the goddess with Ye Cheng was plainly not a casual alliance. They treated him with genuine deference. Though doubts still churned in their hearts, Saint Sun Tianyue's calm persuasion held sway. Even the hot-headed Luoming Jingxian, white-knuckled with anger, clenched his jaw and suppressed his fury. With a last glare at Ye Cheng, he waved for his Saint Sun and accompanying masters to withdraw, averting what might otherwise have erupted into a war to shake the entire Xiaoyao realm. The Yuanling goddess was gone before anyone could react, vanished without a trace. Yue Ying and the other Yulong sect masters stood frozen in mid-bow, while the junior disciples' faces burned with fury and frustration. Through it all, the goddess had been unfailingly courteous to Ye Cheng. She even inclined her head to him before slipping away toward the Yuanling palace entourage. If Ye Cheng hadn't known better, he might have imagined that faint click in his chest was his heart breaking. He ignored it. "Brother Ye Cheng, we'll be taking our leave," Yue Ying said at last, bowing again. Ye Cheng simply nodded. Over the past month on Xianxia Mountain, the intelligence networks of the three great sects had fed him every scrap of information they could gather. Their Asters had cooperated with him at every turn. His haul of spirit herbs, relic fragments, even cultivation insights was already more than most disciples would see in a lifetime. He'd also grown fond of the three sects' younger generation, talented, earnest, and surprisingly warm. When those very disciples had petitioned their own sect leaders to de-escalate tensions today, he found himself in no mood to punish them. Once the last of the Yuanling entourage disappeared into the sky, Ye Cheng turned and strode toward the Yulong sect spirit boat, where a dozen pairs of cold eyes followed his every step. He neither acknowledged nor avoided them. Destiny, after all, would bind them together for much longer than a single mountain retreat. And in that knowledge, Ye Cheng found a tingle of anticipation that had nothing to do with heartbreak. Ye Cheng shook his head with a wry smile, then waved a hand in front of her. "Senior Yue Ying, still reeling from the shock? It's time we head back to the sect." "Huh." At the sound of Ye Cheng's voice, Yue Ying blinked and slowly returned to herself. She scrutinized him from head to toe, her lips parting as if to question him on every detail, but in the end, she swallowed her words. "We'll have a proper talk once we're back at the sect," she said, her voice firm despite her racing heart. "Fine by me," Ye Cheng replied, stretching lazily. Their journey to Xianxia Mountain and the subjugation of the descendants from those three rival sects had done more than sharpen Ye Cheng's skills. It had also granted him invaluable intelligence on the Xiaoyao realm, courtesy of the very masters he'd defeated. Now, even if he chose to remain in the Yulong sect, he no longer needed to mask his true power. Revealing his capabilities would only make it easier to pursue his own objectives. Watching him remain so composed, Yue Ying felt a fresh surge of nervousness, and with it, an even deeper curiosity about the young man at her side. Several immortal elders escorted by Yue Ying now stood before Ye Cheng with palpable awe. Their usual airs of seniority vanished in his presence. Although they bore the proud title of elder, alongside Ye Cheng, they served more like attendants than equals. The Yulong sect disciples aboard the spirit boat, however, were quite used to this. After all, under the protection of Ye Cheng's incarnation in Xianxia Mountain, they had reaped far richer rewards than ever before. Their gratitude and respect for him were boundless. To them, the elders' deference was only fitting for their young master. Unperturbed by the attention, Ye Cheng stepped onto the spirit boat, intent on returning to his chambers to meditate and to inventory his spoils. He spread out his treasures, clusters of luminous lotus seeds, veins of rare spirit ore, and an assortment of cultivation talismans. Carefully, he set aside anything that would aid his own practice and sorted the rest into a separate pouch. Those surplus items, he decided, would be sold upon his return to the Yulong sect, exchanged for precious yuan jing to fuel his next stage of cultivation. With his haul accounted for, Ye Cheng seated himself on the boat's prow. The gentle lapping of the water against the hull, combined with the soft chants of the disciples below deck, created a tranquil atmosphere. Closing his eyes, he slipped effortlessly into meditation, letting the chi of the river and the mountain's lingering aura merge with his own essence. As the spirit boat glided smoothly toward home, Ye Cheng's mind drifted deeper, ready to transform this journey's gains into the next leap forward on his cultivation path. Just as Ye Cheng was lost in thought, a soft ripple stirred his consciousness. Dozens of potent, malevolent auras, tainted by monstrous evil spirits, were racing toward him, all converging on the Yulong sect's spiritual vessel, drifting beneath his feet. Interesting. I assumed I'd have to wait until we returned to the sect to make my move, he mused, but it seems fate has delivered the opportunity to me. Epping out of the secluded cabin atop the ship, Ye Cheng squinted into the distance and whispered, "Perfect." Yu Ying and the others froze, startled by the calm certainty in his voice. Ahead, those dozens of ominous presences materialized above the mountain ridge. Their sudden appearance drew every remaining cultivator in the valleys to gaze upward. And when the leader's figure finally emerged at the front, towering, composed, and radiating power, a reverent hush swept through the crowd. Even the most battle-hardened masters found themselves holding their breath, eyes wide with awe. Look, that's one of the two golden immortal ancestors of the Shenglong immortal dynasty, Golden Immortal Yongming, now a 6th-level Golden Immortal. What is he doing here? Before anyone could finish speaking, Golden Immortal Yongming raised a hand. At his signal, more than 30 heavenly immortal realm cultivators moved in unison. In the blink of an eye, they surrounded the Yulong sect spirit boat and erected a suppression array, sealing every member aboard. Yulong Saint, Yongming's voice rang out, cold and merciless. Disembark and answer for the life of my dynasty's prince. Heads snapped toward Ye Cheng, the so-called Yulong Saint's heir. Their eyes widened in disbelief. Whispers spread through the gathered cultivators. Not only had this young man crushed the heirs of 3 major sects, rumor even claimed he personally slew the 5th prince of the Shenglong immortal dynasty. To kill one imperial heir was shocking. To defeat 3 in succession was almost unheard of. Now, under Golden Immortal Yongming's gaze, Ye Cheng stood alone, his legend poised to collide with the full might of the Shenglong immortal dynasty. The 3 great immortal sects had quietly withdrawn before this day, never once testing their mettle against Ye Cheng. And now, watching him stand unflinching, doubt flickered in their eyes. Could the mighty Shenglong immortal dynasty really subdue this so-called Yulong Saint son? Around him, the masters of the Shenglong immortal dynasty exchanged uneasy glances. Does he truly believe he can win? One whispered. Another snorted. He's only a youth. What hidden weapon could he possibly have? Yongming Golden Immortal turned to the Yulong sect's spirit vessel, as if expecting some unseen power to emerge, but in all its ranks he saw no one to be feared. Perhaps Yue Golden Immortal might pose a challenge, but she was only a 4th-rank Golden Immortal, a contest he could comfortably handle. And the rest of the Yulong sect? A mere handful of fighters, trivial against the 30-plus immortals under his command. At that moment, Yongming Golden Immortal's eyes narrowed and froze. His doubts were answered in a single instant. "Very well," he drawled, voice laced with contempt. "I won't waste my power on you. Consider this your invitation to accompany your prince to the underworld." Ye Cheng's lips curved into a faint, unforgiving smile. His tone was calm, almost casual. So be it. Before anyone could raise a shield or call out a spell, he drew his sword. The blade sang as it sliced through the air, and in that ruthless arc, the contest was truly joined. Ye Cheng stood perfectly still, his gaze steely and unwavering. In his outstretched palm, brilliant swordlight coalesced, an awe-inspiring column of divine radiance stretching thousands of feet, as if it could cleave the very heavens. Then, with a thunderous roar, that blinding beam tore through the air and materialized directly above the assembled masters of the Shenglong Xian dynasty. In a heartbeat, it plunged toward them like a falling star, its unstoppable force promising utter devastation. The sky itself seemed to shudder as the sword light hurtled downward, an omen of inexorable judgment. Chapter 707. A colossal beam of sword light cleaved the sky, descending with irresistible force. Even the seasoned masters of the Shenglong immortal dynasty felt their hearts skip a beat. Yet as cultivators of their rank, they refused to give in to panic, especially when the target stood there plainly before them, Ye Cheng, a mere quasi-immortal. How could a lone sword ray truly threaten their lives? Golden Immortal Yongming, standing among them, swallowed hard and forced out a bark of defiance. "What are you hesitating for? Form up the Shenglong potion formation at once. Trap every last disciple of the Yulong sect. No one escapes. He spat contemptuously. This time, the Yulong sect will be wiped out, and certainly that so-called Yulong Saint Son won't survive. With that, Yongming raised his dragon-engraved golden spear. His immortal aura roiled as he funneled his power into the weapon. The dragon's eyes gleamed, the spear humming with promise of devastation. Across the battlefield, Ye Cheng narrowed his eyes, sword at the ready. He felt the crushing weight of the formation's power bearing down, and he knew the real battle was only just beginning. The entwined dragon spear, a legendary golden immortal level weapon, was what had made him famous. Wielded alongside his exclusive sky stab technique, Yongming Jingxian had every reason to believe he could sweep aside even the strongest practitioners of the golden immortal realm. Now, under his command, more than 30 celestial spirits had arranged themselves into a colossal formation behind him, coalescing into a massive golden dragon that pulsed with power and bolstered his own strength. His confidence swelling, Yongming Jingxian, grinning fiercely, lifted the spear. "You little whelp," he sneered, "prepare to see how vast the distance is between you and me." At that moment, a blinding sword light descended from above like a torrent of starlight. With a roar that shook the heavens, he thrust the entwined dragon spear upward into its path. The impact unleashed a deafening dragon's cry as metal clashed with light, echoing across the battlefield. A searing roar split the air as Ye Cheng's radiant sword light met Yongming Jingxian's golden dragon strike. The two forces collided in a blinding explosion of power, heavenly might pitted against invincible momentum. Yongming Jingxian's confident grin froze. Horror crept into his eyes as he took a trembling step back. "No, this can't be," he gasped. He had poured every ounce of strength into that golden dragon assault, convinced nothing could stand against it. Yet the moment it struck Ye Cheng's swordlight, it shattered like porcelain, failing utterly to halt the advance. Worse still, the swordlight pressed on, descending relentlessly. "Stop it! Stop it now!" Yongming Jingxian cried in panic. He swept his Jiao lance in frantic arcs, summoning wave after wave of spear shadows that roared forward like a storm. Behind him, the other immortals threw themselves into the fray, faces flushed, hearts pounding, for one final, desperate stand. But the brilliance of Ye Cheng's swordlight was relentless. Wherever it passed, everything buckled and crumbled. No barrier, no skill, no plea could withstand its path of destruction. The swordlight swept through every defense as though it were nothing but mist. In an instant, the very bodies of Yongming Jingxian and the others were swallowed by that brilliant flash, extinguished so completely that not a single trace remained. Their final breaths fizzled out into silence. When the radiance finally faded, Ye Cheng lowered his arm, and the sword light dissolved into the clouds as effortlessly as smoke. Only then did the heroes of the Xiaoyao realm fully recover their senses. They stared up at him, suspended in midair, their faces carved with astonishment and dread. Up to this point, the three leading golden immortal sects, Tianyue, Qianghua, and Wanshan, had all maintained a wary peace with Ye Cheng. They had suspected that his background was extraordinary, yet none had truly grasped the magnitude of his strength. Like Yongming Jingxian and the others who had just fallen, they had been far more curious about his origins than prepared for the overwhelming power he could wield. Now, as once proud sect heroes looked on in stunned silence, a single truth resurfaced in every mind. They had gravely underestimated Ye Cheng's might, and it had cost lives. How ruthless can a quasi-immortal be? For all their talk of lineage and honor, the descendants of the three great sects discovered the truth in an instant when Ye Cheng, once known as the Yulong Saint, cut down Yongming Jingxian and his companions with a single, flawless sword stroke. Their previous respect now felt like nothing more than naive flattery. "Background or no background, his power is beyond imagination," one disciple gasped. "No one can stand against him." "Since when has the Xiaoyao realm produced a true dragon?" another whispered, awe and fear warring in his voice. Aboard the Yulong sect's spirit vessel, Elder Yuing and the other senior cultivators had rushed forward to greet him, but now found themselves wordless, faces pale. At last, Elder Tianmu broke the silence. "Elder Yuing, send a report back to the sect, find out our standing, and await further orders." Ye Cheng remained impassive, as if he had heard none of their anxieties. With a slow nod, he vanished in a shimmer of light, only to reappear seconds later on the deck beside Yue. She bowed swiftly. He offered a curt nod in return. "The threat has been eliminated," he said quietly. "Tell Master Lu to seal every gateway. We depart at first light." With that, he turned away, leaving the elders to hasten his instructions, and marvel anew at the legend they had only just begun to witness. When Yongming Jingxian and his companions had spat out their arrogant claim that the Yulong sect was destined for destruction, Ye Cheng had taken immediate notice. After cutting them down, he examined their souls. To his surprise, none of these men had been part of the official expedition against Yulong. They'd merely been stationed in the capital of the Shenglong Immortal dynasty. All they'd heard was that the dynasty's senior leaders were brimming with confidence about the campaign, and that unchecked optimism had emboldened them in battle. That was why they dared to mock him with such presumptuous words. "You think the Yulong sect will fall? Please," one of them had sneered. "Is that even possible?" The moment Yue heard that, her face drained of color. She no longer cared about measuring Ye Cheng's strength. She sensed real danger. With trembling hands, she produced the elder's jade talisman and attempted to contact the sect. But the talisman's glow stayed stubbornly dim. No response came. The Yulong sect had cut off all communication. A cold dread settled over her. If even their own sect was silent now, it meant something terrible was underway. "The sect has met with disaster." Yueying's heart leapt into her throat. Yet Ye Cheng remained unnervingly composed. He simply nodded and said, "In that case, let's return to the sect immediately." "At once," Yue exclaimed. Without another word, Ye Cheng stepped onto the Jade Dragon spirit boat and beckoned Yue to follow. She hesitated for only a moment before scrambling aboard, her behavior surprisingly demure. As she settled beside him, a jarring thought struck her. Who here was the master, and who the disciple? But then she recalled Ye Cheng's formidable reputation. Whatever his rank, his power alone assured him a place of authority far above hers. Still, Yue couldn't suppress a twinge of curiosity. If senior sister Mu Qing knew she'd attached herself to such an astonishing cultivator, how would she feel? But there would be time for such idle musings later. Right now, her sole focus was the calamity unfolding back at the sect. With a low rumble, boom, 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 the Jade Dragon spirit boat lifted off. It soared through the clouds, carving a path toward the distant horizon and carrying them swiftly homeward. From where she stood, Yue watched the boat's silhouette shrink against the sky, her resolve hardening. No matter what awaited them at the sect's gates, she and Ye Cheng would face it together. The assembled masters all let out a collective sigh of relief, their eyes returning to the spot where Shenglong Shanchao and his followers had just stood. Exchanging knowing glances, each of them shared the same thought. After today, Ye Cheng, the holy son of the Jade Dragon sect, will surely become a legend in the Xiaoyao world. Chapter 708. The Yulong sect's spirit boat tore through the mist at an astonishing pace. Yue and the other elders gasped in disbelief. This vessel was only a low-grade Golden Immortal class craft, ordinarily no match for even a mid-ranking Golden Immortal's speed. Yet under Ye Cheng's silent command, its acceleration now rivaled that of a true Immortal. Of course, such a feat came at a price. Once its reserves were spent, the boat would be irreparably damaged, almost certainly beyond repair. But with the sect's very survival on the line, none of the elders hesitated. If sacrificing a single low-grade spirit boat meant saving everyone aboard, it was a cost they were more than willing to pay. As the wind whipped around them, Yue and the others exchanged glances, secretly watching Ye Cheng's calm, focused expression. His talent and power were already the stuff of legends, and they had once feared that such a prodigy might harbor hidden schemes against Yulong sect. Now, witnessing him pour every ounce of his strength into propelling them to safety, relief blossomed in their hearts. Perhaps there was no darker purpose behind his extraordinary gifts, only a steadfast devotion to their shared cause. Yue and the others were all convinced of one thing. Whatever Ye Cheng's scheme might be, he was doing it only to save the Yulong sect. They firmly believed he harbored no ill intent. But Ye Cheng himself was far too absorbed in his plans to notice their misgivings. To him, the Yulong sect was priceless, not only because of Mu Qing's fate, but because they had supported him when he first broke through into the immortal realms. Ye Cheng didn't pretend to be a saint, yet he lived by the simple principle of repaying kindness with kindness. Beyond gratitude, he also recognized that he needed the sect as a strategic foothold. Thanks to the protective might of the 33 Heavens immortal formation, Ye Cheng's power alone could have overwhelmed the entire Xiaoyao realm. In truth, he was only a mid-stage Taoist master, but if he chose to push his limits, he would not fear even a 6th-level true immortal. The only thing holding him back was the ceiling of his own cultivation. For now, he could only cloak himself in the aura of a quasi-immortal, a domain said to rival the strength of celestial immortals and even golden immortals. Such claims sounded hyperbolic, but they did capture the fearsome reputation of the realm's fiercest immortal demons and the edge it gave him in this high-stakes game for Yulong's survival. But if he poses as a quasi-immortal to slay the real one, everything changes. News of such an act would send shockwaves through all of Feixian Daozhou, and even across the 3,000 Daozhous. Any immortal harboring a grudge against him or an old debt with the Kangwu immortal king would instantly label him first under heaven and Kangwu's successor. And in his current state, Ye Cheng simply doesn't have the power to fend off that level of scrutiny and retaliation. That's precisely why he must make this journey to Qiansheng Mountain. The treasures hidden there will let him leapfrog his cultivation and break into the realm of domination. Once he reaches domination, he'll be able to locate the Kangwu Immortal King's inheritance artifact. With the Immortal King's full legacy in hand, Ye Cheng's strength will soar to unprecedented heights, enough that even those at the level of Immortal Venerable will no longer pose a threat. Ye Cheng's eyes burned with resolve. Even if I can't become a dominator right away, achieving Tao Lord perfection will do, he vowed. Once he reached the pinnacle of the Tao Lord realm, he would be able to veil his aura at the level of a celestial. True immortals might still outclass celestials, but for all intents and purposes, a celestial confronting a true immortal is no more absurd than a quasi-immortal challenging a golden immortal. They're both among the world's top-tier powerhouses. Until that day arrives, however, the Yulong sect, his one foothold in this turbulent world, must not be lost. Gathering every scrap of spiritual power within him, Ye Cheng poured it into his spirit boat. In an instant, the vessel's speed skyrocketed, streaking back toward the Yulong sect. But as he drew near, his heart clenched. The entire Yulong mountain range lay ringed by the banners and war formations of the Shenglong immortal dynasty. Every pass was sealed. Although the invaders hadn't yet struck, an oppressive stillness weighed on the sect. From the venerable elders to the newest disciples, fear and solemn dread rippled through the compound. Fortunately, at that critical moment, Ye Cheng appeared on the horizon, just in time to rally his brethren and meet the coming storm. From the highest terrace of the Yulong sect, directly before the sect master's hall, Ye Cheng and the other disciples often lifted their eyes to where Fairy Mu Qing sat in serene meditation. At the sight of her calm, graceful figure, the solemn anxiety in their hearts would ease. Mu Qing would meet each worried gaze with a gentle, confident smile, silently lending them courage. Yet the moment she turned her eyes away, a shadow of boundless concern flickered across her face. Beyond her, hidden from the crowd, lay the true sanctum of the Jade Dragon sect's main hall. There, Kongshu Jin Xian, white-haired and bent with age, sat surrounded by the faint metallic stench of blood and decay. His cultivation, once that of a peerless golden immortal, had all but dissipated. Before any battle had even begun, he was already spent. Even Mu Qing, with all her talent, could have subdued him without effort. And yet no one blamed Kongshu Jinshan for his frailty. His life was nearing its natural end. The real failing lay with the Yulong sect itself, which had produced no one worthy of succeeding him. Not Mu Qing, nor any of the current disciples, could yet fill the void his waning strength had left behind. In that hidden hall, and on that airy terrace, the burden of their future weighed heavily on every heart. A few years ago, Elder Kang Shu of the Jin realm voluntarily left the sect and ventured into the deadly secret realm. His goal was simple but ruthless, to force a breakthrough in cultivation that would prolong his life and steel him for one final, decisive battle. Instead, he emerged broken, wounded, far beyond what any ordinary healing method could repair. 16 days ago, just after Yue Ying and her companions set out to rendezvous with Ye Cheng, the once proud Kongshu slipped back onto sect grounds under cover of darkness. Although his body was shattered, his mind remained as sharp as ever. He sought out only two people, Elder Mu Qing and Elder Long Xiao, and demanded that they seal all news of his return. Thanks to the sect's rare healing artifacts and miracle elixirs, Kongshu spent the next 2 weeks on the mend. By now, he had regained roughly 50 to 60% of his former power, enough to conceal his weakened state and allay any suspicion. What he hadn't anticipated was betrayal from the one he loved like a son. Long Xiao, whom Kongshu had raised and guided since the boy's earliest days of cultivation, quietly turned against him. The elder who had entrusted his life's work and his deepest hopes to Long Xiao now found himself alone, vulnerable, and utterly betrayed. As Yue Ying's party presses on toward Ye Cheng's hidden stronghold, Kongshu must decide. Should he reveal his return and face down Long Xiao's treachery head-on, or should he let events play out in the shadows, biding his time until he can fight with renewed strength? Either way, the coming days promise only one thing: blood on the altar of ambition. Mu Qing's blood ran cold. Her own disciple, the boy she'd raised as her son, had betrayed them, selling their secrets straight to the Shenglong Immortal Court. That act of treachery almost shattered Elder Kongshu's Dao heart on the spot. If duty to the sect hadn't held him back, Mu Qing knew he might have died then and there. Yet somehow, Elder Kongshu endured. In the sect master's hall, he summoned every last ounce of his strength to activate the sect's formation, allowing Mu Qing to tap into its full protective power. Still, her heart remained heavy. This siege by the Shenglong court was unlike any she'd seen before. They'd gathered a fearsome lineup: a Kongshu ancestor in true immortal form, the current sovereign of the Shenglong dynasty, also a true immortal, and Long Xiao. 3 true immortals, united in a single assault. Even Mu Qing hesitated. True, she had once faced down 3 true immortals alone, but at that time, the sovereign had only recently broken through and was still weak in his new realm. Now, all 3 stood at the height of their power. Mu Qing understood that she could not afford a single misstep. He'd always had that weakness. Back then, Mu Qing had the support of the sect's formation spell, and it was that power which let her snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. But everything had changed now. The current emperor of the Shenglong Xian dynasty had advanced to the 4th level of golden immortal cultivation. Alongside Long Xiao and yet another ancient ancestor of the dynasty, the 3 of them acting in concert made Mu Qing's old trick useless. Even with the sect formation on her side, her odds of winning were virtually 0. But we have to hold on, Mu Qing told herself, steeling her resolve. If we can just stall until Yue Ying returns, we'll survive this. Her eyes burned with hope, but anxiety still gnawed at her. In the entire Shenglong Xian dynasty, there were 3 golden immortals, yet only 2 had appeared on the battlefield so far. Where was the 3rd? Had he gone after Yue Ying and the others? Just then, a deafening roar shattered her thoughts. Boom! A colossal wave of immortal energy slammed into Yulong sect's protective formation like a falling mountain. The entire gate shook violently, as if an earthquake had split the very earth beneath it. Mu Qing braced herself against the blast, her heart pounding, because now they would finally see if the formation could hold. Countless disciples at the mountain gate wavered on unsteady feet, their eyes wide with terror as they stared beyond the formation. It's the Molong Patriarch, the Golden Dragon Emperor, and Elder Long Xiao of the Shenglong Immortal Dynasty. Outside the barrier, the Shenglong Immortal Dynasty's Imperial Guards hovered in tight rows, banners snapping in the wind. At their head stood 3 golden immortals, towering figures who swept the gathered Yulong sect disciples with cool, contemptuous gazes. When the young cultivators recognized Long Xiao standing alongside those 2 formidable golden immortals and realized he was leading the assault against their own sect, rage and disbelief flared in their eyes. Mu Qing's urgent warning about Long Xiao's treachery had circulated earlier, but many had refused to believe such a thing possible. Now, however, seeing him marshal the Shenglong forces to attack their sacred formation, every lingering doubt was extinguished. There is no betrayal more loathsome than that of a comrade turned enemy. A fierce, unified hatred ignited in the hearts of every Yulong disciple, binding them together against the traitor who had once stood among them. Ye Cheng allowed himself a small, relieved breath. With the sect's disciples now fully inside the formation, their combined will only strengthened its power. For a moment, he thought he might finally have a chance to catch his breath. Then Long Xiao Jinxian's lips curled into a sinister smile. He tilted his head, eyes alight with contempt. "A colony of ants dares to defy me?" he whispered. "Very well, I'll show you what true despair feels like." A chill ran down Ye Cheng's spine. He sensed something shift in Xiao Jinxian's aura, malice coiling tighter than before. Instinctively, he raised his hand to issue a command, to stop whatever was coming next. But the moment had already passed. In an instant, the two senior elders of the Shenglong Immortal sect lunged forward, their combined might forcing Ye Cheng to scramble mid-cast as he reconfigured the forma, Tian to intercept their strike. And in that fleeting gap, Long Xiao Jingxian unleashed a narrow but razor-sharp lance of immortal energy. The beam wasn't overwhelmingly powerful, but it was precise. It slipped through the formation's weakest seam and streaked past Ye Cheng, unerringly aimed at the great main hall rising behind him. By the time Ye Cheng realized Xiao Jingxian's true intention, it was already too late to avert disaster. A deafening boom echoed through the Yulong sect's main hall as a surge of immortal power struck its ancient timbers. In an instant, the grand chamber collapsed into a cloud of smoking ash. When the dust finally settled, a lone figure emerged from the ruins, the frail sect master, Kongshu Jingxian, his robes singed and eyes wide with shock. "Sect master!" the disciples cried out in unison, rushing forward in horror and disbelief to support the trembling man who had once guided them all. Chapter 709. Long Xiao, you'll pay for this. Mu Qing's beautiful eyes burned with icy rage as she hurled her words into the sky. She had already warned the Yulong disciples about Long Xiao Jingxian's treachery. This betrayal could not be hidden. The moment he appeared, the truth would come crashing down, and panic would sweep through the sect. Still, she had kept one vital secret. The former sect master had secretly returned to the sect, but lay gravely injured. That detail was necessary to keep everyone's spirits from collapsing. But Mu Qing's precautions were no match for Long Xiao's cunning. The instant he arrived, he swept his gaze straight to the sect master's hall, bypassing every trap and barrier she'd hastily prepared. Inside the hall, Kongshu Jinxian struggled to stand. Disciples crowded around him, faces pale with dread. A trembling voice broke the heavy silence. "Sect master, why are you so weak?" Whispers echoed through the hall as the gathered cultivators exchanged terrified looks. Long Xiao Jinxian hovered above them, arrogance shining in his eyes. He clasped his hands behind his back and laughed, his voice booming over the crowd. "Ha ha ha! Now you see why I rebelled. The Yulong sect cannot endure any longer." "If you know what's good for you," Long Xiao's voice rang out, cold and commanding. "Break formation and surrender now. Maybe I'll let you live." He paused, the menace in his tone sharpened. "Refuse, and you'll all be buried with the Jade Dragon sect." A ripple of fear ran through the disciples of the Jade Dragon sect. Their aging sect master's proud facade crumbled, sorrow and fury warred in his eyes. He pointed an accusing finger at Long Xiao, who hovered above them. "Long Xiao," he thundered, "I've served you faithfully all these years. Have you no honor, no conscience to betray your own sect like this?" Long Xiao laughed, a bitter sound. "Old man," he sneered, "nature's law is simple. The strong survive, the weak perish. Spare me the lectures." He smoothed his robes, regaining that composed, cruel smile. Casting a leisurely glance over the assembled disciples, he said, "Enough talk. Here's your choice. The first 100 to step out of formation and surrender live. The rest will die with the sect they so blindly defend." A stunned silence fell over the formation. At the back, Mu Qing's face turned ashen. She clenched her fists, desperate to stop this madness before any more could be sacrificed. How could the two golden immortals of the Divine Dragon Dynasty ever show her mercy? What startled Long Xiao even more was that, despite the disciples on Jade Dragon Mountain quaking at the news of his betrayal, and at the fate of their ailing sect master, not one of them dared to answer him. Even those he had personally trained, or the elders he once called friends, remained as silent as the grave. Perfect, Long Xiao sneered, rage curling the corners of his lips as a cold, murderous light ignited in his eyes. If you won't learn what's best for you, I won't hesitate to show no pity, or remember our bonds of brotherhood. With a savage roar, Long Xiao, now ascended to Golden Immortal, stepped forward into the ranks of the Divine Dragon Dynasty's Imperial Guards arrayed behind him. The two elder Golden Immortals flanking him laughed in unison and formed up at his side. In an instant, the trio and their thousands of immortal warriors locked into a vast killing formation whose oppressive aura outmatched even the famed defense arrays of the Yulong sect. Mu Qing's heart pounded as she stared at the encroaching enemy lines. Around her, every disciple and follower of the Yulong sect, Elder Kang Shujingxian included, set their jaws in grim determination. The Shenglong Immortal Dynasty's forces had surged up to the border with a single purpose: to annihilate Yulong sect in one decisive strike. There would be no survivors. All they could do was stand and fight until their last breath. "It's my fault," the sect leader confessed, voice heavy with self-reproach. "I lacked the wisdom to read people, and now I've dragged you into this ruin." Elder Kong Shu bowed low to the assembled elders, lips pressed tight in apology. But even as his head knelt, his eyes ignited with a fierce light. He lifted his gaze to Long Xiao, who hovered ominously in midair. "Still," he declared, "I will make this right. Even if I die, I will correct my mistake." Long Xiao, already entrenched within the Shenglong dynasty's battle formation, hesitated for a flicker of a heartbeat under that blazing stare. Then the formation's divine aura steadied him, filling him with perverse confidence. A cruel smile twisted his lips. "Defiant even as you face death?" he taunted. "How amusing! Look at me. I'll reduce you to ashes." With that challenge ringing through the air, Long Xiao, the Golden Immortal at the vanguard, amplified the formation's power and surged toward Yulong sect's protective barrier. He raised his blade for the killing stroke, but in that instant, the sky split open in a riot of colors. A spirit boat, its sails shimmering like a living rainbow, tore across the horizon and materialized above Yulong Mountain. With startling speed, it stationed itself directly between the Yulong sect and the advancing army of the Shenglong Immortal Dynasty. "That's our banner. Elder Yueying has returned. Look, Elder Yueying is here. She's come back to save us." Where moments before the sect's disciples stood on the brink of despair, now relief washed over them like a tide. They surged forward in cheers, faces bright with hope. Even Mu Qing and the Golden Immortal Kongshu exchanged triumphant smiles. On the opposite side, the Shenglong formation skidded to a halt. Long Xiao and the three other Golden Immortals exchanged tense glances. Their frowns deepened, then, almost instantly, shifted into disdainful smirks. "Ha!" Long Xiao sneered, voice loud enough to carry over the battlefield. "One Golden Immortal thinks she can turn the tide? How amusing." "Don't get your hopes up," Emperor Jinlong of the Shenglong Immortal Dynasty sneered. "I was planning to hold my trump card back, but it seems even a scrawny camel will tower over a horse. If I truly want to crush the Jade Dragon sect, I must unleash my full strength." He lifted his voice, eyes flashing with triumph. "Old 17, enough hiding. Come out and show the Jade Dragon disciples what real despair looks like." At his command, the Jade Dragon sect's ranks, who had just been cheering Yueying and her companion's return, fell into stunned silence. From within the Shenglong formation, a new wave of Golden Immortal energy bloomed. It didn't match the Emperor's own aura, but it belonged to a freshly ascended Golden Immortal, and that alone was enough to tip the scales of battle. Whispers rippled through the assembly. That's Emperor Jinlong's younger brother. He was hailed as the unparalleled genius of the previous generation of the Shenglong Immortal Dynasty, his talent simply unmatched. And yet, after only 100,000 years of cultivation, he had already broken through to the Golden Immortal realm. At the gates of the Yulong sect, an elder caught sight of that golden aura, and despair flickered in his eyes. The newcomer, cloaked in a brilliant light, met Yueying and the gathered disciples with a derisive snort. Then he strode forward and assumed the central position within the Shenglong Immortal Dynasty's formation. No sooner had he taken his place than the formation surged with renewed power, instantly crushing the uplifted spirits of the Yulong sect, spirits that had soared at Yueying's return. Yet even as despondence rippled through the ranks, Fairy Yueying inhaled steadily. There was no fear in her serene eyes, only joy and relief. "You finally made it," she murmured, her voice soft but clear. She turned to the young man at her side, her expression one of unmistakable warmth. Ye Cheng gave a curt nod. "Yueying, the rest of you, fall back into the sect and hold the formation steady. Make sure nothing I do disrupts it." "Leave it to us," Yueying answered without hesitation. "Understood." At Ye Cheng's composed command, Yueying and her companions, already well aware of his prowess, bowed deeply. Then they guided the shuddering spirit boat safely through the gates of the Yulong sect. Everyone who saw this, from the sect's disciples to the observers in the Shenglong Immortal dynasty, stood frozen in disbelief. Had they misread the situation? "What's Yueying thinking?" one disciple whispered. "Does she really believe that this Yulong saint's son, barely a quasi-immortal, can go toe-to-toe with us?" scoffed another. Chapter 710. The masters of the Shenglong Immortal dynasty exchanged surprised glances. They had braced themselves for a brutal showdown. Yet, without warning, Yueying left Ye Cheng behind and retreated to the gate of the Yulong sect aboard her spirit boat. "Is there something strange about this boy?" one of the golden immortal ancestors murmured, his expression darkening. The three ancestors fixed Ye Cheng with narrowed eyes, suspicion flickering across their faces. Before they could speak, golden immortal Long Xiao, himself from the Yulong sect, cut in coldly. "Don't waste time doubting him. He's nothing but a worthless brat who snagged the title of Holy Son of the Yulong sect by leaning on that bitch Mu Qing." He scoffed. "Yueying is setting up a diversion. She plans to use Ye Cheng as a decoy, drawing our attention while she rendezvouses with Mu Qing and reconfigures their sect's formation to repel our attack." "Really? Could that be true?" another ancestor asked, his face paling. All three glanced at Long Xiao, recognizing that as a member of the Yulong sect, his information was likely accurate. They turned back to Ye Cheng and found him standing perfectly still, his dark eyes burning with fierce intensity. Inside the Yulong sect's gates, Yueying had truly left Ye Cheng behind and dashed into the courtyard. Mu Qing stared in disbelief. She didn't pause to question her junior sister. Her heart seized at the thought of Ye Cheng stranded outside. He was the Dragon Empress's chosen protege. If he perished because of Yulong sect's scheming, how could she face her sovereign? Instinctively, Mu Qing summoned her immortal energy, ready to tear through the formation and rescue him. Before she could move, Yueying grabbed her arm. "Senior sister, hold on. You have no idea how powerful the Holy Sun really is." Mu Qing opened her mouth to argue, but her words died on her lips. Persuaded by Long Xiao, the golden immortal of the Shenglong dynasty, 3 more golden immortals fell in behind, and their forces surged forward. Dozens of celestial immortals and hundreds of quasi-immortals, under the command of 4 golden immortals led by Long Xiao himself, wove a vast killing array. The assembled immortal might coalesced into a colossal dragon, its great roar echoing through the sea of clouds above. Mu Qing's heart pounded. She watched helplessly as the dragon-shaped power enveloped Ye Cheng, realizing too late that this battle would be far more perilous than she or anyone had imagined. A great, shadowy form blotted out the sun, stretching over 100,000-foot radius with an oppressive force so crushing it felt as though the world itself might buckle. Even Mu Qing, renowned for his extraordinary endurance, gasped for air under that weight. He could only watch, helpless, as the phantom dragon conjured by the killing array zeroed in on Ye Cheng's aura, then swept down with terrifying speed, fangs bared and claws glowing with destructive energy. Crack! But instead of the sickening sound of flesh and bone shattering, a thunderous clash of steel rang out. A moment of stunned silence fell over the courtyard as Ye Cheng, calm and unhurried, drew his sword and met the dragon's strike head-on. The blade sang against the phantom's crushing blow, sparks scattering like fireflies in the gloom. The assembled disciples, their eyes wide with disbelief, stared at him as if he were a ghost. How could a mere cultivator withstand an attack born of the killing array's might? Before anyone could answer, the air shimmered, and an even more astonishing sight unfolded, leaving every breath caught in a collective gasp. Ye Cheng stood among the ranks of the Yulong sect, his eyes fixed on the great Shenglong formation as it roared to life. At first, nothing seemed unusual, until, with a soft thud, a mid-rank immortal at the core of the array staggered, unable to withstand the backlash, and crumpled to the ground. Such accidents weren't unheard of. Even the mightiest killing arrays could recoil disastrously, inflicting injuries, or bellow, on the weaker cultivators manning them. None of the onlookers batted an eye. Then, almost in the same heartbeat, it happened again, and again. Thud, 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 thud. One semi-immortal, 2, 3. In an instant 10, then 100. Next came the celestial immortals, and one by one, they too were sent flying from their posts. Within the heart of the Shenglong formation, death rained down. Members of the Shenglong immortal dynasty, once arrogant, unshakable, now tumbled from their stations, support pillars shattering like glass. The magnificent dragon phantom born of the array began to flicker, its thunderous growl reduced to a forlorn whine, and then, with a final shuddering crack, the entire formation collapsed. Only in that moment did the masters of the Yulong sect fully grasp what had befallen their foes. Unseen until now, the four strongest defenders of the Shenglong formation, Long Xiao, Jingxian, and two other legendary celestial immortals, had all perished in the backlash. Ye Cheng's jaw tightened. The tide had turned, and the battlefield fell eerily silent, save for the distant echoes of shattering spirit pillars. In that hush, victory, and its consequences, loomed clearer than ever. The four opponents of the Jingxian realm exploded like fragile porcelain under the force of Ye Cheng's sword. Their bodies had seemed whole, an unbroken shell, but inside, their immortal vessels lay in ruin. Their Dantian seas of consciousness, souls, immortal energies, even the chaos runes that anchored their powers, all were ground to dust in that single, devastating stroke. Now only corpses lay on the battlefield, faces frozen in grotesque, mocking grimaces, a grim testament to how swiftly their end had come. Across the field, Yulong sect's disciples, elders, and sect masters stared in shock. It dawned on them that these four had never even realized they'd fallen before death claimed them. A single, startled gulp echoed through the crowd. Then, as if on cue, every breath that had been held was released in one collective exhalation. All eyes turned upward to Ye Cheng, still suspended in the air, his sword dripping with arcane flame. Awe and yearning gleamed in the faces of the younger disciples, envy and respect in the eyes of the seniors. Nearby, Muqing's gaze flickered between Ye Cheng and Yue Ying, who stood beside him, her expression alight with triumph. Conflicted emotions warred on his face. He felt as though he were trapped between two realities, one foot in this world, the other in a dream. But the undeniable truth floated in the charged air. Ye Cheng had delivered a strike for the ages, and everyone present knew they had witnessed something legendary. "Junior sister," Muqing began, her voice laden with concern. Yu Ying waved her hand dismissively, offering a helpless smile. "Senior sister, don't look at me like that. I know as little about this sacred son as you do, and yet try to stay positive." She shrugged. "With the power he's shown so far, I doubt even the entire Yulong sect would draw more than a passing glance from him. What do we really have to fear?" Muqing opened her mouth to argue, but memories of Ye Cheng's sword strike, how it shattered the Shenglong formation with a single blow, froze her words. A bitter smile tugged at her lips. Yu Ying's tone might have been frivolous, but her point was undeniable. Given what Ye Cheng had already done, he could uproot the foundations of the Yulong sect whenever he chose. Any resistance on their part would only cost them more precious swords. Where on earth had the Yulong sect found such a demonic prodigy? Muqing wondered silently. She glanced back at Ye Cheng, curiosity burning in her gaze as she tried to gauge the man who now held their fate in his hands. Muqing's steady gaze drew Ye Cheng back to full awareness. He inclined his head in her direction, then vanished in a flash, reappearing moments later in the main hall of Yulong sect. "Grandmaster, Elder Muqing, Elder Yueying," he greeted, bowing respectfully. Kongshu Jinxian, whom Yun simply called the Grandmaster, rushed forward to support him. Until that moment, the Grandmaster's face had been pale with anxiety. Now, however, astonishment took its place. He straightened, voice trembling with urgency. Assemble a force of celestial immortal elders at once. Send them to the Shenglong immortal dynasty and seize control. If we delay, some other power will snatch it from us. Mu Qing's eyes widened. Invade the Shenglong immortal dynasty? You really mean to rely only on celestial immortals? Technically, all three golden immortals who had guarded Shenglong lay defeated. Yet their golden immortal patriarchs still held court in the imperial city. Surely mere celestial immortals could not supplant such a presence. Mu Qing opened her mouth to protest, but then she glanced back at Ye Cheng. The look in his eyes sent a chill through her bones. He believed it would be enough. And in that moment, Mu Qing realized just how unshakable his conviction and power had become. The Holy Sun says the last golden immortal of the Shenglong immortal dynasty has fallen? Ye Cheng stayed silent, and Yue stepped forward to relay the news. As she spoke, Kongshu Jinxian and Mu Qing exchanged a look and exhaled in relief. They had been dreading the thought that Ye Cheng might have slipped away to the Shenglong capital, slain the golden immortal there, and then raced back to the sect, all within a single day. The very idea of such speed, even without considering his combat prowess, bordered on the miraculous. Learning instead that the golden immortal patriarch himself had marched to their doorstep eased their minds. After all, they had already witnessed Ye Cheng's sword shatter their formation in an instant. Slaying a golden immortal elder was undeniably a feat of glory, but far less perplexing than the notion of vanishing and reappearing hundreds of miles away in the blink of an eye. 2 weeks later, the Yulong sect stood triumphant. The 4 golden immortals of the fallen Shenglong immortal dynasty, and even the traitor Long Xiao, had been swept aside. Without its golden immortals to guard it, the once mighty dynasty collapsed under Yulong's relentless assault. In a mere fortnight, Shenglong's vast territories were declared lost, with only a few scattered pockets of resistance still holding out. 99% of its lands now flew Yulong's banner. Such a staggering conquest sent Yulong sect's power and prestige surging. Although Kongshu Golden Immortal remained off the battlefield, nursing his injuries, he monitored every advance through the sect master's orders. With each new district formally annexed, he sensed the sect's fortunes rising in perfect harmony. Given 10,000 years, he knew Yulong sect would fully absorb and consolidate these gains, and stand among the few supreme Jingxian powers alongside Tianyue sect and Yuanling Palace. All of this was thanks to the young disciples now in secluded cultivation on Shengzi Peak. Recognizing their decisive role, Sectmaster Kangshu Jingxian issued a decree. 90% of all spoils the sect has accumulated since the Shenglong Zhenshao campaign were to be awarded to Ye Cheng. The remaining 10% would stay with Yulong sect as its own harvest. No one dared to oppose the old master's ruling. After all, without Ye Cheng's extraordinary talent and courage, Yulong sect's predicament would have been far worse than that of Shenglong Xianxia. Who else could have led them to victory, or even mustered the strength to claim these spoils in the first place? Nor did Ye Cheng take the sect master's generosity lightly. His cultivation demanded an almost unfathomable wealth of resources, far more than the treasures he'd already secured on Qiansheng Mountain could provide. High atop Holy Sun Peak, Ye Cheng stood on the platform of stone and mist. With a subtle motion of his hand, he called forth the Jutiandao Palace. A rippling glow formed in midair as the palace's ethereal gates appeared. One by one, he levitated rare heaven-forged artifacts, divine-grade spirit herbs, and the priceless demon pills harvested from celestial beasts, each precious item dissolving into the Dao Palace's boundless interior. In seconds, every last treasure was sealed safely away, ready for him to draw upon whenever he chose. Ye Cheng's fortune had swelled to 150,000 yuan crystals, thanks to his twin harvests from Qiansheng Mountain and the Shenglong Immortal Dynasty. Even if he rented the Zhuqiandao Palace at 100 crystals per day, he could afford it for 1,500 days, nearly 5 years. Money was of no consequence. Without hesitation, Ye Cheng poured 10,000 yuan crystals into the Dao Palace, pushing its temporal acceleration to the absolute limit. He activated the 10,000-fold speed-up and entered a 100-day secluded retreat. When his retreat concluded, he emerged exactly as he'd hoped, a perfected Dao Lord. The moment he transcended to Tao Lord perfection, a thunderous boom echoed through the skies. His aura skyrocketed from quasi-immortal to full heavenly immortal, rippling outward in a dazzling display of power. Within the halls of Yulong sect, shock and awe erupted. Elders like Kongshu Jinqian rushed forward, eyes wide, to behold Ye Cheng's newly attained might as he stood firm against the final thunder tribulation, majestic, unyielding, and absolutely sublime. There's no exaggeration in saying that the heavenly immortal thunder tribulation can obliterate even a perfect golden immortal. Yet when its bolts struck Ye Cheng, not a single scar appeared on him. His expression remained perfectly calm. After all, the heaven and earth thunder he bore was merely a simulation, conjured by his Yuanqi Tiangong to create the illusion of shattering into the heavenly immortal realm. How could such a mock tribulation harm him? As the final sparks of thunder died away, Ye Cheng quietly acknowledged his success. He had broken through into the heavenly immortal realm. But there was no triumphant smile on his lips, only solemn focus. For most cultivators, the leap from the Tao Lord realm into the domination realm hinges on drawing in Chaos Yuan Qi to reshape their fledgling inner worlds into stable chaos worlds. That method suits ordinary breakthrough seekers, but Ye Cheng was far from ordinary. His inner realm was founded upon 1,000 independent domains, and by today's count, he had woven a staggering 9,999 distinct Tao domains into that world. Such a feat defied all precedent. Ye Cheng's inner world, if set among the heavens, would rival the North Wilderness Divine Continent and the South Mysterious Divine Continent in sheer size. But that very vastness brought its own burden. The chaos energy needed to reshape such an expanse could no longer be supplied by ordinary Chaos Yuan Qi alone. He would require, at minimum, 1,000 Chaos Sky Stones. The realization weighed heavily on Ye Cheng. Even in the immortal realm, Chaos Sky Stones were prized above almost all other treasures, true strategic resources. After transcending to the immortal realm, cultivators advance by deciphering the laws of chaos and painstakingly inscribing them as chaos runes. This condensation demands not only tremendous immortal power, but also a massive infusion of chaos chi to bridge and sustain the process. A single chaos sky stone, rich with condensed chaos yuan chi, could accelerate rune formation dramatically. Without it, forging just one chaos rune could take 10,000 years or more. With each successive realm, the time needed to forge new chaos runes grows exponentially. For a cultivator advancing from quasi-immortal to celestial immortal, condensing 10 chaos runes would normally take at least 3 epochs, 3 million years, if no chaos sky stones are available. But with the aid of these precious stones, even someone of mediocre talent can complete the transformation in just 300,000 years. An exceptional genius might break through in as little as 30,000 years, sometimes even 3,000. The same acceleration applies when moving from celestial immortal to golden immortal. In practical terms, any faction that controls a large cache of Chaos Sky stones can field dozens or even hundreds of heavenly immortals in far less time than rivals. In the Xiaoyao realm, heavenly immortals already form the backbone of every great power, and even the most prestigious golden immortal sects prize them above all else. Yet, Chaos Sky Stones are exceedingly rare. Only the fabled Chaos Divine Mountain produces these heaven-born treasures. There was only one Chaos Divine Mountain in the entire Xiaoyao realm, and it lay firmly under the control of the Yuanming Immortal Dynasty, the realm's sole true immortal regime. Any sect that wanted Chaos Heavenly Stones faced just 2 options: submit to Yuanming's authority, pay regular tribute, and hope for the occasional allocation of a stone or two, or turn to auction houses where prices soared to unimaginable heights. Either way, supplies remained woefully scarce. Even after Yulong sect absorbed the Shenglong Immortal Dynasty, their treasury held only about 50 stones. Ye Cheng refused to play by those rules. Rather than watch his sect haggle over scraps or drain its coffers, he decided to petition the Yuanming Immortal Dynasty directly for a bulk purchase. He knew, however, that his chances were slim. A single Chaos era seldom yielded more than a few hundred heavenly stones, and the dynasty reserved the lion's share for its own needs. Still, if he didn't ask, he'd never know. Ye Cheng estimated that the Yuanming Immortal Dynasty held no more than 1,000 Chaos Sky Stones. You can start with Yuanming, he said to himself, but you can't put all your hopes there. We'll need to find other sources for these stones. In the inherited memories of the Kangwu Immortal King, countless secret realms were said to contain Chaos Sky Stones. Yet most of those realms belonged to eras long past, hundreds or even thousands of years ago. Whether they still existed was anyone's guess, and if they did, their treasures had likely been exhausted generations ago. On top of that, these magical domains were so well sealed that time had barely worn away their arcane barriers, placing them far beyond the Xiaoyao realm where Ye Cheng stood. A single expedition to recover even one Chaos Sky Stone might consume years. Weighing these realities, Ye Cheng realized he needed guidance. After a moment's thought, he resolved to seek out Kongshu Jinxian, the elder and former sect master. Though his cultivation had long since plateaued, Kongshu's hard-won experience and deep knowledge of secret realms would be indispensable to any future quest. Ye Cheng hoped to find some clue that would help him unravel the problem he'd been wrestling with. With that in mind, he made his way straight to the sect master's hall. Just as he was about to speak, Kongshu Jinxian cut him off with unexpected news. In 3 days' time, Kongshu began, his tone calm but unmistakably serious, the 5th prince and the 3rd princess of the Yuanming Immortal dynasty will arrive at Yulong sect to pay their respects. Ye Cheng paused, taken aback. This was far more than a mere courtesy call. It could reshape the sect's standing among the immortal lineages and complicate his own plans. Chapter 7:12. Ye Cheng raised an eyebrow in surprise as he read the summons. Then, as he mulled over the implications, calm returned to his expression. Even if his daring exploits on Qiansheng Mountain were set aside, his role in obliterating the Shenglong dynasty had already sent shockwaves through Xiaoyao world. The Jingxian sect, though modest by world standards, was considered a minor giant. Only 10 or so sects rivaled the former Shenglong dynasty in influence. Their sudden destruction would inevitably alert the overlord of Xiaoyao world, so it was no wonder he'd taken notice of the man behind it all. Kongshu Jinxian watched him nervously. Seeing Ye Cheng still silent, he hastily offered, "Your Highness, if you feel it unwise to answer their call, I can refuse on your behalf." He was keenly aware that Yuanming Xian dynasty stood supreme in Xiaoyao world, but it had only one true immortal ancestor. In stark contrast, Ye Cheng had, with a single sword stroke, slain 4 golden immortals in battle. Silence hung between them for a moment, heavy with unspoken calculations. Ye Cheng's gaze drifted back to the letter, his grip tightening on the hilt of his sword. To accept or decline, either choice would reshape the balance of power in Xiaoyao world, and he would choose carefully. Kongshu Jinxian was certain of one thing. If Ye Cheng truly carried his master's inheritance, then he had to be at least a perfected, true immortal. No lesser power could have produced such a prodigy. The Yulong sect had secured such a valuable ally, and naturally they would spare no effort to cultivate and bind this relationship. Compared to the might of the Yulong sect, the Yuanming Immortal dynasty was virtually insignificant. Ye Cheng understood Kongshu Jinxian's motives all too well, yet he welcomed the gesture of protection. After all, Yulong had been his first foothold in the immortal realm, and Feixian Daozhou, the sect's home, harbored the legendary treasures of the Kangwu Immortal King. In time, that stronghold would serve as one of Ye Cheng's chief bases in the fairy world, and likely pave the Gu family's path into the upper realms. Best of all, every branch of the Yulong sect, from grandmasters to novices, now answered to him. Their loyalty was far more convenient and far less risky than founding a new sect from scratch or forcefully collecting vassals. Ye Cheng didn't dare refuse the Yuanming Immortal dynasty's envoys. In fact, he welcomed the opportunity to cultivate ties with them and quietly feel out the possibility of acquiring a Chao Sky Stone. "By all means," he smiled. "Please make the arrangements. I will pay my respects in 3 days' time." 2 days later, in the sect master's hall of Yulong sect, all was prepared for Ye Cheng's visit. On the VIP dais sat a striking pair in sumptuous imperial robes, the 3rd prince and the 5th princess of the Yuanming Immortal dynasty. Flanking them on both sides stood several celestial elders of Yulong sect. At the very front of the hall were Mu Qing, Yue Ying, and Kongshu Jinxian, the sect's 3 highest-ranking masters. Yet, when Ye Cheng stepped through the doors, each of them silently yielded the central seat. The third prince hardly registered the gesture, his expression polite but indifferent. The fifth princess, by contrast, knit her brows at the empty chair, clearly displeased by the formality. What none of the senior elders, least of all Kang Xianxia, suspected was that the royal siblings had come on their own initiative, not under a direct summons from the Yuanming court. Although the Yuanming Immortal Dynasty's High Council was well aware of Ye Cheng's exploits, they scarcely gave them any serious thought. A junior cultivator in the quasi-immortal realm had single-handedly shattered the Shenglong Immortal Dynasty? Preposterous. Not even their own crown prince, poised on the threshold of true immortal, could claim such a conquest. Their only explanation was that Ye Cheng must have wielded some forbidden artifact of incomparable power, an inference born more of fear than of evidence. Soon they whispered of a monstrous fiend stalking the Xiaoyao realm, rather than credit the young man's own skill. Moreover, a far weightier matter preoccupied them. The lineage's venerable true immortal patriarch stood on the cusp of breakthrough. Each step into the true immortal realm yields a quantum leap in strength. Once he ascended, the Yuanming Immortal Dynasty's grip on Xiaoyao realm would be absolute. With the patriarch's advancement looming, every available resource and every ounce of attention was devoted to ensuring his success. While everyone else was busy gathering cultivation resources for the old patriarch or filtering out any troubling reports so as not to disturb his mood, news of Ye Cheng fell into an unexpected lull. With the court's attention fully consumed by the patriarch's condition, no one bothered to follow up on Ye Cheng's affairs, except the third prince and the fifth princess. Though much of the High Council already regarded the first prince as the undisputed heir apparent of the Yuanming Immortal Dynasty, the succession had yet to be formally declared. The younger princelings and princesses all nursed their hopes of swaying the balance in their favor, and of recruiting the most promising talents into their camps. Neither the third prince nor the fifth princess minded that the senior ministers paid Ye Cheng no heed. In fact, they relished it. An untapped genius like Ye Cheng could prove invaluable. If they could win his allegiance, their own standing, and the number of formidable disciples at their command, would rise immeasurably. With the court distracted, the pair quietly set their plan in motion, determined to secure Ye Cheng's loyalty before any rival even realized he was there. The pavilion was silent for a moment as the senior officials exchanged glances. None of them took Ye Cheng, widely known as the Yulong Saint Sun, entirely seriously. He was rumored to have slain a minor celestial being while still only a quasi-immortal, but whisperings of his true power varied wildly. Even so, each of them recognized talent when they saw it. Regardless of how tall these rumors grow, one minister murmured, anyone who can fell a celestial being before full transcendence has surely touched the threshold of a top-tier genius. If we can recruit him, it'll have been worth the journey. The third prince leaned forward, stroking his chin thoughtfully. He tapped out a quick voice message on his jade tablet for his sister. Don't let her cold shoulder you, cousin, he teased under his breath, eyes alight with interest. At his side, the fifth princess curled her lip in disdain. She stared unconvinced at the empty main seat, her arms folded tightly across her chest. We're here to assess recruits, she said coolly, yet I've yet to see a single display from this so-called Yulong Saint Sun. I can't say I'm impressed. She remembered perfectly well how news of their arrival had spread through the sect weeks ago. Protocol demanded that the Yulong Saint Sun come out to greet the royal delegation, if not to the foot of the mountain, at least to the gates of the sect. But no one had stepped forward. Not a greeting, not a courtesy, not even a courtesy envoy. Even now, Ye Cheng was nowhere to be seen. Where is he? She demanded, glancing around the opulent pavilion. What could he possibly be doing up there that he can't spare a moment for the crown prince and princess? Murmurs rippled through the assembled officials. If Ye Cheng did regard the imperial family so lightly, they thought, then perhaps he was as lacking in judgment as they had first assumed. Yet that same lack of respect only made him more intriguing. Whoever he wasn't afraid, an invaluable trait in their world. The third prince leaned back and gave his sister a knowing smile. "Patience," he said softly. "The strongest talents always keep us waiting. Let him come when he's ready." But the fifth princess only scowled, refusing to be placated. "We came all this way," she snapped, folding her arms more tightly. "And for what? A compliment from a stranger? I want to see this Yulong Saint son, now." Outside, the morning sun climbed over the mist-shrouded peaks of the Yulong Mountains. Somewhere in the labyrinthine halls of the sect's cliffside palace, Ye Cheng waited. Unseen, unheard, he was about to make his entrance. And when he did, the entire imperial delegation would find that sheer silence could speak volumes. "Is he showing off again? Relax, sister. Geniuses are always a bit arrogant." The third prince's heart skipped a beat at his sister's curt reply. Leaning toward the fifth princess, he whispered, "You're making a mountain out of a molehill. We sent our invitation to the Yulong sect 3 days ago, and due to minor delays, we arrived a day early. It's only natural they're still putting things in order." Yet the fifth princess's icy gaze lingered, her displeasure unchanged, until Ye Cheng entered the sect master's hall. In that moment, surprise softened her expression. Masters who ascend to true immortality often bear divine countenances, but Ye Cheng's presence transcended even that, ethereal and breathtaking, as if he belonged to another realm. Though the fifth princess fought to maintain her composure, a faint warmth kindled in her eyes when she realized his cultivation had reached the heavenly immortal realm. Only days ago, he'd been at the quasi-immortal stage. Such a dramatic leap was nothing short of astounding. In the fifth princess's eyes, this was a failing. For all her nobility, she had settled for only a quasi-immortal as a recruit, an impressive gift to be sure, but still lacking by her standards. If Ye Cheng had truly ascended to the heavenly immortal realm, however, there would be no question. A talent of that caliber serving as her and her brother's retainer would secure their prestige above all the other princes and princesses. The third prince, unaware of his sister's private calculation, only noticed the faint softening in her gaze. A rush of relief warmed him. He was just about to step forward, break the tension, and explain their purpose, when the fifth princess spoke herself, cutting through the silence. "So," she said, her voice cool and measured, "you are the holy son of Jade Dragon, already risen to the heavenly immortal realm. That is indeed an impressive accomplishment." She lifted her chin with the grace of a proud swan and studied Ye Cheng with renewed interest. "Let me be candid," she continued. "My brother and I came here to recruit a follower, someone truly exceptional. At first I hesitated, uncertain you met our standards, but now I believe you are exactly the kind of talent we need. It looks like only a brief excerpt has come through. Could you please provide the entire chapter text you'd like me to rewrite? Once I have the full passage, I'll reshape it into clear, idiomatic English, renaming Gu Changqing to Ye Cheng as a male protagonist, and deliver a polished, ready-to-read chapter." Chapter 713. A heavy silence fell over the main hall of the Jade Dragon sect. Elder Kang Shu Jinxian's face drained of color as fifth Princess Munuan raised her chin in haughty disdain. Ye Cheng, whose status now eclipsed even the elders, stood quietly, yet the princess treated him as though he were begging for her attention. "Your Highness," Elder Kang growled, "please show some respect." Before the words had fully left his lips, Ye Cheng lifted a hand to stay him. His eyes glittered with amusement as he stepped forward and addressed the princess directly. "It seems there's been a misunderstanding," he said, voice calm but cutting. "You and your companion did not come here on behalf of the Yuanming Immortal Dynasty. You came to see me." He tilted his head, lips curving into a faint, playful smile. "If that's the case, I suggest you turn around and leave. I have no desire to continue this conversation." With that, Ye Cheng straightened his robes and began to walk away. The fifth princess froze, her eyes wide in shock. Even third Prince Mu Liang, who had accompanied her, was left utterly speechless by Ye Cheng's cool dismissal. He chastised himself for letting his sister speak out of turn. He knew her words had been impertinent, but he never expected Ye Cheng's reply to be even bolder. After all, who were they to dismiss a guest so cavalierly? Ye Cheng was the peerless overlord of the Xiaoyao realm, a direct scion of the Yuanming Immortal Dynasty. Illegitimate or not, his bloodline alone commanded far more deference than a mere golden immortal sect could ever demand. Yet with a single dismissive wave, Ye Cheng had cut the fifth princess off and ordered them from the Yulong sect's grand hall. The princess's chest heaved as fury lit her eyes. She sprang to her feet, her silk robes rustling like thunder, and hissed to the Yulong saint, "Stop him, right now!" Ye Cheng paid no heed. He strode toward the jade-carved doors, as if the princess's summons were nothing more than a breeze. Each step echoed through the silent chamber, a deliberate reminder of his arrogance. The fifth princess's knuckles whitened around the folds of her sleeve. If she allowed him to leave unchallenged, the grapevine would soon carry the story throughout the sect. Their half-siblings, already eager to spy on any misstep, would feast on her disgrace, twisting every word until she had no honor left. Summoning every ounce of her will, she squared her shoulders. This insult would not stand. The princess met the departing figure of Ye Cheng with a gaze sharper than any blade. Whatever it took, public scandal or private duel, she would force him to answer for his insolence. Their very standing in the Yuanming royal family would be gravely compromised if they failed. The fifth princess clenched her teeth so tightly her knuckles went white. At last she managed to force out 2 words. "What do you want? Speak up, then we can negotiate." Negotiate? Ye Cheng gave a half-smile, turning his unruffled gaze toward the princess and her brother. He saw only 2 impetuous juniors, a pair of hotheads not worth his anger. Straightening his posture, he said calmly, "I want to buy a Chaos Sky Stone. Do you even have the means to sell one?" Chaos Sky Stone? The fifth princess blinked in confusion. Seconds later, the flush of fury drained from her cheeks, replaced by a look of thinly veiled pity. Even the third prince at her side broke off his attempts to persuade her, regarding Ye Cheng with equal parts skepticism and fascination. The Chaos Skystone was no ordinary treasure. In every Chaos era, the entire Yuanming immortal dynasty produced a mere 900 of them, and 600 of those were reserved exclusively for ancestral cultivation. That left only 300 in circulation, most snapped up by noble families, military patrons, and secretive sects long ago. And now this young man had the audacity to demand one. Of the 300 Chao Sky Stones the Yuanming immortal dynasty allocates each year, 100 are reserved for royal use, another 100 are handed out as rewards to powerful outsiders, securing their loyalty, and only the final 100 are set aside for trade. But even that small allotment can only be dealt in by the premier sects of the Xiaoyao realm, Yuanling Palace, Tianyue sect, and the like, and not by their heirs. Only the sect masters who stand on the threshold of true immortals have the standing to negotiate such transactions. As for the Jade Dragon sect, even its sect master, Kangzhu Jinyan, lacks the credentials to broker a deal for Chao Sky Stones. And yet here comes Ye Cheng, the holy son of the Jade Dragon, boldly declaring that he intends to purchase them. It's akin to a pauper on the city streets demanding that the founder of the Yuanming immortal dynasty personally transmit him the secrets of cultivation. The Holy Son's audacity is nothing short of laughable. In that moment, the anger that had flared in the fifth princess's eyes dissipated. She lifted her chin, a cool smile playing at the corners of her lips, then turned gracefully to face her brother. Ye Cheng watched as the third prince ran a hand through his hair in exasperation. "Brother, I think it's time we left," the fifth princess murmured, her voice laced with thinly veiled irritation. They had come to court him, hoping to recruit his talents for the Yulong sect. Yet when Ye Cheng casually suggested they purchase the Chaos Sky Stone, the prince and princess realized they'd overreached. Who but a fool, or someone maddeningly arrogant, would expect such an unheard-of transaction? Their disappointment was plain to see. Without a word, they rose and prepared to take their leave. Their tones remained polite, but the haughty tilt of their chins said everything. A dozen Yulong disciples drew their swords, faces flushed with outrage, ready to defend their sect's honor. Ye Cheng raised a single hand, cutting through the tension as easily as he might part silk. "Don't waste your anger on them," he said, voice steady. "They're nothing more than inexperienced youths who don't yet know their place." He settled back onto the stone bench, his expression calm. In his eyes, the third prince and fifth princess were no more than children playing at politics, presumptuous and naive, but ultimately harmless. And though they'd tried to recruit him, it was clear their tactics had fallen far short of what Ye Cheng would tolerate. However, Ye Cheng was not about to stand by and do nothing. That simply wasn't his style. There's an old saying, he mused, that a son must pay his father's debts. But the reverse is just as true. When the young stir up trouble, the elders must also shoulder the blame. That very day, in the far north of the Xiaoyao realm, the Yuanming immortal dynasty suffered a cataclysmic strike. From the western sky came a single sword slash, its arc stretching for thousands of feet, and it cleaved the imperial capital in two. The dynasty's venerable patriarch, who had been in seclusion working toward the fourth level of the true immortal realm, was forced to abandon his retreat and rush into battle. Though he miraculously survived the strike, the injury he sustained was so severe that his cultivation would remain frozen for at least 10 epochs. Had the sword's assault ended there, the north would have been shaken but not shattered. Yet as the dust settled over the ruined Yuanling imperial capital, a lone figure emerged from the devastation. Clad from head to toe in white, he strode through the carnage with a long sword at his side, an omen of darker days to come. Under the horrified gaze of the Yuanling immortal dynasty's masters, Ye Cheng strode forward, grasped the Chaos Divine Mountain, one of the dynasty's greatest foundations, standing unchallenged for hundreds of epochs, and, before their very eyes, carried it back to Yulong Sect's courtyard. The instant he appeared, word raced across the northern Xiaoyao realm. Yulong Sect has produced a peerless true immortal. The new overlord of the Xiaoyao realm has arisen. Meanwhile, scarcely half a day had passed since the third prince and the fifth princess left Yulong Sect. Though their departure was recent, they'd already written the sect off. In their view, a legacy built on an unpredictable saint like Ye Cheng could not endure. It was only a matter of time, they said, before this ancient heritage crumbled to dust. It had been glorious centuries ago, but that legacy was destined to end here and now. The third prince shook his head with regret, his voice heavy. Across from him, the fifth princess only sneered, her eyes cold and unsympathetic. She couldn't have cared less about the inner affairs of the Yulong sect, yet she nursed a particular grudge against Ye Cheng for his earlier insolence. If it were up to her, the sect would collapse tomorrow, and he'd finally understand just how ruinous his pride could be. Before either of them could dwell on such thoughts, a thunderous roar split the air. A massive wave of spiritual pressure crashed down from the heavens. The ornate spirit vessel carrying the royal siblings shuddered violently, and so did the two golden immortals standing watch. Neither could lift a finger. Who dares attack the princes and princesses of the Yuanling immortal dynasty? They bellowed in unison, their faces flushed with shock and rage. The third prince and fifth princess stared at each other in disbelief. Shock gave way to astonishment so sudden it left them speechless and utterly unprepared for what would come next. Everyone present recognized that overwhelming pressure. It could only belong to their grandfather, Grand Immortal Yuanming Gentian, the very pillar of the Yuanming immortal dynasty. His face was ashen, his breath shallow and uneven. Yet the fury burning behind his crimson eyes seemed almost tangible, ready to scorch the two grandchildren who dared stand before him. "Who attacked my sect?" His voice boomed like a tempest. "Speak up at once, and move aside." The roar alone was enough to topple the two golden immortals at his side. They collapsed unconscious. Then his scarlet gaze settled on the trembling third prince and fifth princess. His words cut the silence like a blade, cold and merciless. "Explain yourselves. How did you provoke the Yulong sect? Whom did you offend?" For a moment, the young royals froze. "We provoke the Yulong sect?" they echoed, exchanging bewildered glances. They knew of the Yulong sect, and they knew the weight of provoke. But when had heirs of the Yuanming immortal dynasty ever needed to provoke such a powerful clan? And then, in that instant, the awful truth crashed over them like a wave. Because Yuanming Gentian's spiritual projection had forcefully imprinted the scene into their minds, him striking Ye Cheng, leveling the imperial city, and claiming the divine mountain, their expressions went utterly blank, drained of all color. Chapter 714. Ye Cheng didn't even notice, nor did he care, about the stunned expressions on the faces of the third prince and the fifth princess. He had already handed the Chaos Divine Mountain over to the Yulong sect, leaving behind an advanced incarnation to guard it, and now he was focused entirely on his next objective, securing more Chaos Sky Stones. The Chaos Divine Mountain carved out by the Yuanming Immortal Dynasty once yielded only a few hundred of these precious stones each era, and the current output had nearly all been consumed by the Yuanming Genshin. By the time Ye Cheng arrived, fewer than 300 stones remained on the entire mountain, far too few for him to break into the domination realm. Luckily, Kangshu Jinxian had sung a different tune. She pointed him toward the legendary Wanchao battlefield. Nestled within Feixian Daozhou, a realm that boasted over 10,000 immortal dynasties, this desolate field was said to be the final resting place of the fallen titans of the Dragon Phoenix Immortal Dynasty. The Jade Dragon sect itself was little more than a surviving branch of that once mighty clan. In its heyday, the Dragon Phoenix Immortal Dynasty had teamed with immortals whose power dwarfed even the great houses of today. According to the rumors, the Wanchao battlefield still lay strewn with the detritus of those colossal beings, shattered relics, drained life forces, and, most enticingly, untapped veins of Chaos Skystone. If Ye Cheng could tap into even a fraction of that cache, he'd have more than enough to shatter his current limits and step into the domination realm. With conviction in his heart, he turned away from the mountain's jade peaks and set his course southwest, toward the distant howls of an ancient battleground. Behind him, the third prince and fifth princess watched in disbelief as he vanished into the swirling mists of Feixian Daozhou, unaware that he was about to tread a path filled with ancient legacies and deadly trials. Though the Dragon Phoenix Immortal Dynasty once reigned supreme, founded by over 10 true ancestors and stretching to every corner of the Xiaoyao realm, time and fate have not been kind to it. In the present day, it pales beside the Yuanming Immortal Dynasty, which, though itself diminished, still holds sway over the northern territories. Yet every empire meets its doom, and a cataclysm shattered the Dragon Phoenix Dynasty long ago. Only a handful of its cultivators survived. Some fled beyond the Xiaoyao realm's borders, seeking to rebuild elsewhere. Others remained behind, forming what is now known as the Jade Dragon sect. Even in ruin, the old dynasty left behind precious heirlooms, among them a rare pass to the vast Wan Dynasty battlefield. Ye Cheng lifted his hand and watched as the ancient jade dragon's seal in his palm pulsed with an inner light. This token, etched with draconic runes and humming with long-forgotten power, marked him as a scion of the Dragon Phoenix line and promised entry into a realm where legends still walked and fates could be rewritten. Feixian Daozhou stretches across almost one-third of the immortal realm, its territory equivalent to the combined expanse of dozens of lesser realms. For 10,000 immortal dynasties, it has stood as a crucible of inheritance, where every great house sharpens its heirs to mastery. Deep within Feixian Daozhou lies the fabled Wanchao battlefield. In the primordial Chaos era, this desolate plain was the very wellspring of chaos gods and demons, an accursed place still known by scholars and cultivators as the source of chaos. Long before the rise of immortal Dao civilization across the 3,000 Daozhous, the boundless void gave birth to savage deities and fiendish demons. These chaotic beings lived for little more than slaughter and destruction. Though immense in power, they could not withstand the onslaught of the later-born innate creatures, those first pure spirits forged from the essence of the void. One after another, the ancient innate creatures hunted down and sealed every source of chaos, imprisoning or destroying the fiends that emerged. Wanchao Battlefield is one of the last of these sealed chaos sources. Its barriers hold firm, yet deep within its cursed borders, new chaos gods and demons continue to spawn, an eternal testament to the wild forces that once lorded over the void. In the chaotic realms, the gods and demons themselves have become prime training grounds for Wanchao's high officials to temper their heirs and protégés. Yet beyond these formidable adversaries, each chaos source conceals rare treasures born of heaven and earth. The Chaos Well, which purifies the flesh and allows a true immortal's body to undergo rapid transformation. The Chaos Dao Lake, which cleanses one's essence and marrow, pushing an immortal practitioner's cultivation to unprecedented heights. Of all these wonders, there is one prize above all that drives Ye Cheng and compels him to the Wanchao battlefield. Every chaos source, however remote, occasionally gives rise to a new chaos Tianshan, a living mountain condensed from pure chaos Tianxi. Discovering one of these newborn peaks could grant Ye Cheng enough power to perfect his mastery, even elevate him to the threshold of quasi-immortality. And even if fortune refuses him a fresh chaos Tianshan, the battlefield still brims with countless other boons to propel his ascent. In the entire Wanchao battlefield, well over 1,000 Chaos Tianshan beasts have already been born. Hunt down a few more, and you'll secure the Chaos Tianxi you're after. What's more, the Chaos gods and demons born here carry vast reserves of Chaos Yuan Qi in their bodies. Slaying them is one of the fastest ways to amass both Chaos Yuan Qi and Chaos Sky Stones. Back atop Holy Sun Peak, Ye Cheng concentrated his spiritual power and channeled it into the Dragon Phoenix Immortal Dynasty token. The Jade Dragon Talisman hummed and quivered, then flared with divine light. In an instant, a swirling teleportation vortex opened before him, exuding a cold, ancient aura. Without hesitation, Ye Cheng stepped into the portal. The power of divine teleportation wrapped around him, lifting him off his feet. Moments later, he opened his eyes to find himself in an entirely new world, a wild, untamed landscape under a sheet of lead-gray clouds, as though a storm was brewing on the horizon. Broken walls and fractured towers stretched to the horizon under a cloud-choked sky. As Ye Cheng's awareness returned, he realized he was lying in the center of an ancient, ruined city, right inside a dilapidated teleportation array. This place must once have been part of the fabled Dragon Phoenix Immortal Dynasty, now long fallen to dust. The Wanchao battlefield was legendary for its abundance of treasures, relics of the old world, magical crystals, and forbidden scriptures waiting to be claimed. Immortal dynasties had poured vast resources into this war-torn expanse. Grand cities were erected at key nodes, each guarded by elite masters. Their purpose was twofold: to harvest the battlefield's riches on a regular schedule, and, more critically, to protect their most promising disciples from the fierce competition that raged here. Even heirs of immortal lords, or so-called true immortal scions, could be overwhelmed if they let down their guard for a moment. That brutal reality made garrisoning powerful cultivators absolutely essential. Ye Cheng forced himself to sit up, every muscle protesting after the teleportation backlash. Around him, the teleportation seals still glowed faintly with residual energy, an unstable reminder that whatever had brought him here might return at any moment. He pressed a hand to his temple, gathering his scattered senses. Somewhere nearby, treasures beckoned. But first, he would need to find solid ground and allies before the battlefield claimed another casualty. The richer an immortal dynasty grew, the more strongholds it carved out on the battlefield of 10,000 dynasties. At its height, the Dragon Phoenix Immortal Dynasty held 13 cities there. Now, those once proud outposts, looting the one beneath Ye Cheng's feet, lie in shambles. All that remains of each bastion is a single teleportation array, its runes still faintly glowing. Through these ancient gates, the dynasty's descendants can enter the battlefield of 10,000 races by presenting specially forged tokens. But what has become of the battlefield over the countless centuries? Which powers now claim its ruins, and what hidden treasures lie waiting to be claimed? Ye Cheng has no answers. In the memories passed down from the Kangwu Immortal King, the existence of the battlefield of 10,000 dynasties was only ever mentioned in passing. He himself never set foot there. Now he stands at the threshold of the silent array, utterly in the dark. If he hopes to survive and to learn the lay of the land, he must gather his own intelligence. First things first, he mutters, turning away from the dormant teleportation circle. I need to find a city that's still inhabited. With that resolve, Ye Cheng steps forward, ready to carve out his own path amid the ruins. Ye Cheng's advance ground to a halt the moment his spirit sense detected over a dozen auras descending on the city below. In the next heartbeat, they were inside the walls. At their head strode a powerful immortal robed in purple, and in an instant the newcomers surrounded him. How interesting, the purple-clad immortal mused, eyes alight with surprise. A scion of the fallen immortal dynasty, right here. Little mortal, your luck has run out. He raised a hand, and the dozen or so immortals behind him fell into formation, closing off every route of escape. When the circle snapped tight, the leader's expression grew serious. "You have no chance of slipping away now," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "However, I'll offer you a deal. Venture into a chaos well for our elders. If you succeed, you walk free and we'll reward you. Fail, and you perish here." He tilted his head as if inviting Ye Cheng's agreement. "So what do you say? Fair terms?" Ye Cheng stood perfectly still, his face unreadable, as he studied the immortal's outstretched hand, silent but every bit as calculating as his captor. Until the immortal finally spoke of the Chaos Well, Ye Cheng had shown no real reaction. Yet at those words, his eyes flickered with unmistakable interest. On this deadly battlefield of the 10,000 dynasties, the most coveted prizes aren't weapons or artifacts at all, but the legendary Chaos treasure lands, among them the Chaos Well, the Chaos Lake, and even the fabled Chaos Divine Mountain. Of all these, the Chaos Well held a special allure for Ye Cheng. It is said that its waters can purify an immortal's body, accelerating their metamorphosis and shattering long-standing bottlenecks in cultivation. Though Ye Cheng already wields enough power to overwhelm a 6th-level true immortal, that might is born more of Tao-inspired insight than raw physical strength. In fact, his dominance stems from the blessings of the 9,999 great Tao realms, combined with the Yuanxi Tinggong technique and the 33-day immortal formation ritual. These forces fuse into a terror on the battlefield, but none have yet broken through to enhance his corporeal form. As a result, while his killing intent can cow even a 6th-level true immortal, Ye Cheng's actual body remains only on par with a low golden immortal's. That level of physical prowess is still formidable, enough to inspire awe and fear, but it falls short of the miraculous transformation the Chaos Well promises. In this war-torn world, Ye Cheng knows that true power lies buried deep within those legendary lands, and he can no longer afford to pass up the chance to claim it. Ye Cheng's cultivation had reached only the level of complete Taoist master, a formidable achievement to be sure, but still below the golden immortal. His body, though exceptional for a Taoist, lagged just behind that of higher-ranked immortals. If he perfected the Yuanxi Tiangong technique through advanced Odai refinement, his power would soar, easily placing him among the top 3 in any Taoist hierarchy on Earth. Yet this very fact highlighted his weakness. His physique wasn't strong enough to match his spiritual prowess. Determined to close that gap before marching onto the Wanchao battlefield, Ye Cheng resolved to locate a Chaos Well, whose legendary energies could bolster his physical cultivation. He had barely set out on his search when, to his astonishment, a Chaos Well suddenly materialized before him, as if fate itself had delivered the very treasure he sought. Chapter 715. 3 days later, in the western reaches of the Wanchao battlefield, lay the desolate expanse known as the Meteorite Dragon Wasteland. Here, 9 ancient wells stood silent and foreboding, each exhaling a never-ending stream of extraordinarily rich, pure Chaos Yuan Qi. Passing immortal masters couldn't help but stare with burning eyes. Just a single strand of that pristine energy could save them a decade's worth of arduous cultivation. These wells were none other than the legendary Chaos Wells, treasures that countless immortals had long hunted across the Wanchao battlefield, and now, miraculously, all 9 appeared at once. Yet despite their envy, no one dared draw near. The entire wasteland was ensnared by an ancient killing array called the Meteoric Dragon Sky Formation, erected by the true master of the 9 Chaos Wells. Any who attempted to breach it would meet certain death. Ye Cheng, a Tao immortal master, forced himself to calm the storm of ambition in his heart. He knew all too well that even those who had broken through to the true immortal realm would suffer grievous backlash if they tried to breach this formation. After all, when the Meteoric Dragon Sky Formation was crafted, 6 of the great true immortal dynasties had combined their power, and only members of those 6 clans were permitted to draw on the 9 Chaos Ancient Wells concealed within. Among the gathered cultivators, even the boldest souls weighed their chances and wisely held back. Just as Ye Cheng exhaled and prepared to turn away, a sudden rushing wind sliced through the air. "What's that?" someone whispered. Every pair of eyes snapped upward. Riding the gale was a procession of immortals, unlike any before. At its head strode a figure garbed in a robe as red as living flame, his immortal aura pulsing with undisputed authority. He was unmistakably a golden immortal master, the pinnacle of cultivation. Following him were more than a dozen cultivators, each one radiating the refined might of perfect golden immortals. A hush fell over the crowd, replaced instantly by waves of envy and awe. Even Ye Cheng couldn't help but feel his pulse quicken as the red-robed master and his retinue descended toward the sealed formation. A cluster of immortal dynasty masters hovered above the jagged peaks of the meteoric dragon wasteland. Among them stood a youth in white whose cultivation, though he seemed scarcely 10,000 years old, had already attained true immortal rank. Whispers spread through the circle. This was the young genius of the Purple Moon Immortal Dynasty, one of the 6 true immortal dynasties. Escorted by the dynasty's golden-ranked immortals, he had come here to undergo the baptism of the Chaos Well. A senior immortal master from another dynasty watched the procession and let out a bitter sigh. "That's the difference between the top true immortal dynasties and the rest of us," he murmured to his companion. "They simply claim entire chaos treasure lands for their heirs. Generation after generation, their geniuses grow ever stronger. We, by contrast, scavenge for rare treasures of heaven and earth. And even if fortune grants us a chaos treasure land of our own, it never stays under our control for long." Ye Cheng glanced over at the far side of the courtyard, where banners from the various fairy dynasties flapped in the wind. The Purple Moon Immortal Court claimed descent from only one true immortal ancestor, yet its influence here rivaled even the venerable Yuanming Fairy Court. Still, his place in the 10,000 Dynasties battlefield had come by pure chance. Everyone knew that the true test lay beyond the invitation itself. Most entrants from lesser sects barely scratched the surface of what the battlefield offered. Their gains were negligible compared to those earned by heirs of the great true immortal lineages. He let out a soft sigh and immediately heard a mocking laugh at his elbow. "Fool, do you actually believe that white-clad youth is the pride of the Purple Moon Immortal Court?" Ye Cheng's heart kicked against his ribs. He whipped around to confront the speaker, only to find himself face-to-face with a golden immortal at the 7th level, a cultivator of far greater stature than any Xianxia disciple present. Swallowing his indignation, he forced a respectful bow and managed a composed reply. "Taoist, forgive my curiosity, but on what grounds do you cast doubt upon him?" A ripple of attention passed through the other Xianxia masters nearby. Secretly, they all shared that same simmering skepticism, but none dared voice it while so formidable a golden immortal stood before them. Ye Cheng stood at the center of the clearing, his pure white robes fluttering in the hot, sulphurous wind of the meteorite dragon wasteland. Around him, the assembled masters of the Purple Moon Immortal Dynasty watched with thinly veiled envy. He was being personally escorted by the famed Golden Immortal Master, surely a clear sign of his hidden potential. What secret advantage did Ye Cheng possess to earn such special treatment? The Golden Immortal Master's lips curled into a mocking smile. He swept his arm toward the backs of the Purple Moon cultivators who had dared to follow Ye Cheng into this savage domain. "Tell me," he drawled, "have any of you ever seen a guardian place a forbidden yuan lock on his own prodigy before sending him into the Chaos Treasure Land for baptism?" A hush fell over the crowd. "Forbidden yuan lock?" One of the Purple Moon Masters echoed, disbelief tinging his voice. All eyes shifted to Ye Cheng's left wrist, where a simple jade-white ring glimmered. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a decorative bracelet, but to any celestial stage cultivator, the ring's true nature was obvious. It was a vicious, arcane relic known as the Forbidden Yuan Lock. Once worn, it suppresses the chaos runes within its bearer, sealing away his immortal vitality so completely that even his hard-won cultivation becomes meaningless. Murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Why would the Golden Immortal Master willingly cripple his star pupil? And if Ye Cheng truly carried such a burden, how many other mysteries lay hidden in his unassuming appearance? At first, none of the masters dared to examine Ye Cheng too closely. After all, the Purple Moon Immortal Dynasty's name alone was enough to instill fear. But as they recovered their composure, Something in the young man's eyes made them pause. "He's not one of their prodigies," one elder whispered. "He's a prisoner." Another traced the emblem on Ye Cheng's white robes. "That crest belongs to a fallen immortal house. The Purple Moon Dynasty's expedition discovered him, dragged him out here to the meteorite dragon wasteland, and forced him to serve as their well-digger." A wave of sympathy passed through the circle as the masters looked back at Ye Cheng. They all knew what the Chaos Well demanded. Unlike other treasures, its spring lies dormant at the bottom, brimming with raw chaos chi. To awaken that power, and to temper one's body with it, a cultivator must descend into the well's depths, set up a formation, and trigger the spring. But each activation leaves behind surging currents of violent chi. From the well's mouth to its deepest chamber, the shaft becomes a gauntlet of lethal energy, a true test of life and death. Even a golden immortal would be grievously wounded by the well's chaotic chi. What's more, the Chaos Well itself imposes a natural restriction. Only cultivators below the golden immortal rank may enter. Consequently, each time the well is opened, the major immortal dynasties must dispatch their peak masters and equip them with rare forbidden devices to stabilize and activate the formation. Even so, every activation inflicts heavy casualties, and the few artifacts capable of resisting the well's corrupting energy grow ever more precious. As time went on, those veteran commanders at the battlefield of 10,000 dynasties devised a ruthless scheme. They began preying on the scions of vanquished houses, specifically the last descendants of the dragon and the Phoenix immortal dynasties. With their dynasties destroyed and no powerful patrons to back them, these heirs became easy targets for capture and coercion. Ye Cheng, descended from one of the once mighty immortal dynasties, stood out in the crowd not just for his flowing white robes, but for the extraordinary heritage and prodigious talent coursing through his veins. Though his cultivation had only reached the level of a celestial immortal, his innate gifts made him a match even for golden immortals of similar rank. It was precisely this combination of skill and expendability that made him the ideal candidate to venture deep into the world's most dangerous wells, ensuring a higher chance of success while sparing the dynasty's top experts from needless risk. As murmurs and empathetic sighs spread through the spectators, the masters of the Purple Moon Immortal Dynasty scarcely glanced their way. Ye Cheng himself appeared perfectly indifferent, as if he'd long since accepted whatever fate lay in store. Yet the moment his escort halted before the 9 Chaos Wells, a spark of excitement flickered in his pale eyes. He surveyed the yawning chasms, each one cloaked beneath the fearsome meteorite dragon heavenly formation, with a faint, knowing smile. "The defenses of these true immortal dynasties are impressively tight," he murmured, and though the barriers seemed insurmountable, that very challenge sent a thrill coursing through him. Ye Cheng folded his arms beneath his sleeves, already calculating how he would breach defenses designed to thwart even the most formidable celestial immortals. High above each Chaos Well hovered a top-tier true immortal formation. Without the matching dynastic token, even if Ye Cheng unleashed the Xianxia killing formation and shattered this barrier, it would vaporize the well itself. That was why he had restrained himself until now. The red-robed golden immortal withdrew his token and readied to cast it into the well, intent on nullifying the formation's protection. A fierce light blazed in Ye Cheng's eyes, yet he couldn't help but glance longingly at the other 8 wells. This wasteland held 9 Chaos Wells in total, but only one answered to the Purple Moon Immortal Dynasty. The remaining 8 belonged to other lineages and were sealed by their own tokens. He had come for a veritable mountain of gold, but the dynastic restrictions meant he could claim only 1/9 of it. That realization pricked at him with bitter regret. At that moment, as if answering Ye Cheng's unspoken thoughts, dozens of mighty auras erupted on the horizon, each radiating an indomitable, overbearing power as they surged toward the meteorite dragon wasteland. Chapter 16. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A dozen imperious auras cut through the air like sharp blades, driving every cultivator near the meteorite dragon wasteland to bow their heads and make way. These were no ordinary masters. Each aura bore the seal of a great immortal dynasty. Ordinarily, such power breeds arrogance, but as onlookers caught sight of their banners, pride gave way to stunned silence. Huishan Immortal Dynasty, Linglong Immortal Dynasty, Mo Yue Immortal Dynasty, and Zidian and Ziyang Immortal Dynasties. A gasp ran through the gathered immortal masters. Though these 6 dynasties jointly claimed stewardship over the meteorite dragon wasteland, their top masters rarely, if ever, set foot here at the same time. The sheer improbability of their convergence sent ripple after ripple of shock through the crowd. Not even the most seasoned veterans had witnessed such a fortuitous gathering. It wasn't by chance that the 6 great immortal dynasties had gathered in the meteorite dragon wasteland. Every master present exchanged sharp, knowing glances. Only those with razor-keen intellects could have risen so high in cultivation. Acting on instinct, they immediately sent word back to their homelands, and the answer arrived in a flash. A contingent from Linglong Immortal Dynasty had discovered a hidden treasure realm. There, they stood on the brink of birthing a brand new Chaos Mountain. News of a nascent Chaos Mountain electrified the air. Each of the 6 dynasties had already dispatched its finest champions to the various Chaos treasure lands under its sway, Chaos Well, Chaos Lake, and so on, to undergo baptismal transformation, steel themselves, and prepare for the coming clash over control of this primal peak. For every cultivator gathered, the promise of a fresh Chaos Mountain meant one thing above all: untold wealth. The thought sent a thrill through their veins. For any true immortal dynasty, even a second-rate one led by a lone true immortal, the sudden birth of a Chaos Mountain is the prize of a lifetime. Securing its raw, chaotic energies could cement their power for centuries. And for the handful of first-rate dynasties, like Ziyue or Zidian, each boasting multiple true immortals, the wealth hidden within such a site is beyond measure. It's little wonder that rumors of a newly awakened Chaos Well in the meteorite dragon wasteland sent 6 great dynasties racing to stake their claim. Under a sky thick with drifting meteor shards, teams from each dynasty gathered before 9 yawning Chaos Wells. The air crackled with tension as immortal cultivators, robes billowing, eyes aflame with ambition, waited for the moment to strike. Leading the Purple Moon Dynasty's expedition was their revered Golden Immortal, his gaze unwavering as he stepped forward. Without uttering a word, the Golden Immortal pushed the young scion Ye Cheng toward their designated well and motioned him to descend. At that instant, the assembled masters of the 5 other dynasties exchanged knowing smiles. After all, dispatching an heir to infiltrate a Chaos Well, seeking the treasures of vanished dynasties and the fabled Chaos Treasure Land, was as much a testament to strategy as it was to strength. The masters of the 6 great immortal dynasties have tried this technique before, but never with results that truly met expectations. And never, until now, has a golden immortal of the Purple Moon Immortal Dynasty demonstrated it so openly in front of allied cultivators. Elder Mo Yun, one of the dynasty's respected golden immortals, felt the weight of dozens of pairs of eyes on him. His cheeks heated. If he'd had any choice in the matter, he'd never have exposed such a blunt method before his peers. Yet the stakes were too high. This summit at Chaos Divine Mountain demanded every talented cultivator the Purple Moon Dynasty could muster. Elder Mo Yun was, by comparison, an ordinary golden immortal, hardly the kind of genius capable of personally opening a Chaos Well. So however much it mortified him, he had no choice but to call upon Ye Cheng, he dynasty's brightest rising star. Ye Cheng, the elder said, forcing calm into his voice. He swept his arm through the air and summoned a pill-sized fragment of azure light. It hovered before him, humming with latent power. Descend into the well and activate it. All at once, the murmurs in the courtyard ceased. Every cultivator's gaze snapped to the young man, standing quietly at the edge of the platform. Ye Cheng's face was unreadable, his dark eyes steady as he met each of them in turn. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, ready to undertake the dynasty's most delicate operation. The chaos energy waiting below would not yield easily, but with his skill and determination, the fate of the entire summit now rested on his shoulders. It was a white jade array talisman, precisely the tool needed to awaken the latent energy at the heart of the Chaos Well. Drop this talisman into the well's depths, the Purple Moon Immortal Dynasty elder commanded, his voice cold and uncompromising. As long as you return alive, I swear you'll be free. Now move. At that, The other 5 dynasty leaders exchanged barely concealed smirks. Freedom? A cruel joke. If Ye Cheng died in the well, so much the better. If he survived, well, such a prodigious talent would never escape the Purple Moon's clutches. In a world with countless chaos treasures, geniuses capable of single-handedly activating one were as rare as they were coveted. No immortal house would willingly let him go. They'd see to it that every ounce of his power was wrung out in endless experiments and torments. Then, when he was spent, consign him to a silent grave in some other abyss. Yet even as their ambitions gleamed beneath polite masks, Ye Cheng stood unmoved, his expression as calm and unreadable as ever. None of the masters from the 5 great immortal dynasties dared to intervene for Ye Cheng, until a sharply amused voice cut through the tense air. His aura, it's decidedly cold. All eyes swiveled to the speaker, a young man in flowing black robes, his features smooth and boyish. Yet despite having cultivated for only 30,000 years, he had already broken through to the 3rd level of the Golden Immortal realm, the very same tier occupied by the veteran red-robed Golden Immortal who now loomed over Ye Cheng, ready to cast him into the Chaos Well. Within the Purple Sun Immortal dynasty, this dark-clad youth's status far surpassed that of his rival. He regarded Ye Cheng with a playful smile. Lifting one elegant hand, he offered, "Kneel and call me master, and I'll save you from the Chaos Well. No need to take the plunge." Silence fell as all awaited Ye Cheng's answer. The red-robed Golden Immortal of the Purple Moon dynasty felt his complexion shift in an instant. Though the 6 great immortal dynasties of the Meteorite Wasteland were formal allies, the bonds among Ziwei, Xiang, and Zidian ran far deeper. All 3 had descended from the long-vanished Zetian sect, and their leaders still remembered each other from those distant days. He listened closely as the black-robed Golden Immortal Duzhong spoke. In the Xiang dynasty, Duzhong's reputation was unparalleled, earned through prodigious talent and cemented by birthright. The Du family was second in prestige only to the royal line, and boasted 3 true immortal ancestors among its ranks. By contrast, the red-robed immortal stood alone as his family's strongest scion. Should he suffer disgrace or defeat, his entire lineage would crumble with him. He could not afford to offend Duzhong, so he bowed his head respectfully, forcing his wavering pride into silent deference. The precarious balance of power among the 3 dynasties and his family's survival depended on it. Ye Cheng hesitated. If Duzhong truly intended to spirit him away, then the journey to the Meteorite Wasteland would be pointless. He'd surely refuse. He already knew, from the idle gossip of outsider cultivators, exactly what the Chaos Well was capable of. So when Duzhong spoke again, Ye Cheng's voice came out almost too plaintively. "Brother Duzhong." Age meant little here. Duzhong was younger, but this wasn't the moment for courtesy. A flicker of contempt crossed Duzhong's face, but he said nothing. Instead, he flung a forbidden weapon to the crimson-robed Golden Immortal standing nearby. The Immortal's eyes lit up with greed. With that weapon in hand, he could safely awaken the Chaos Well by directing any immortal spirit, and it worked 3 times. Trading Ye Cheng for such a prize was an absolute steal. Just as the crimson-robed Golden Immortal reached to tuck the weapon into his sleeve, however, Ye Cheng, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. He didn't even glance at Duzhong. Instead, he fixed a calm, steady gaze on the Golden Immortal in red robes and said evenly, "What are you waiting for? Remove the seal and let me enter the well." That single challenge sent a shockwave through the Meteorite Wasteland, and even the countless immortal cultivators gathered around its perimeter, leaving them all in stunned, breathless silence. Chapter 717. The words echoed across the edge of the Meteorite Wasteland, freezing every onlooker in place. Shock and disbelief spread through the crowd like wildfire. "What did I just hear? Is this immortal from the declining Zidian dynasty courting death?" someone gasped. All eyes were on Ye Cheng. From start to finish, he'd refused to even glance at Duzhong's offer. In the assembled throng of immortal masters, Duzhong's name was spoken with reverence. He was a golden immortal backed by 3 true immortal ancestors, power and prestige few dared challenge. Yet here Ye Cheng stood, dismissing him outright. Not only had he rebuffed Duzhong's request, he had done so without a shred of deference. Duzhong's expression turned ashen. Beside him, the senior golden immortal who led the Xidian dynasty, let out a cold, mocking laugh. He stepped forward, eyes flicking scornfully between Ye Cheng and Duzhong. "Is this how you carry yourself, Duzhong? Once you were extraordinary, today you're mediocre at best." He paused, brow arching. "A descendant of a waning dynasty doesn't even deign to look at you." A hush fell once more. Ye Cheng remained unmoved, his gaze calm and unwavering. Around him, the immortal masters exchanged glances, uncertain, excited, alarmed. In that silence, the true weight of Ye Cheng's defiance settled over them all. "Tsk, it seems your Du family really has fallen on hard times. Otherwise, you wouldn't be forced onto this stage." Sun Miao's mocking voice echoed through the courtyard. As a golden immortal from one of the great clans in the celestial realm, one whose lineage and power matched the Du clan's, his taunt stung all the more. The tension between him and Duzhong crackled like gunpowder. Duzhong's blood had barely cooled from his last humiliation, and now Sun Miao's words twisted his features into an even uglier scowl. Across from them, the red-robed golden immortal who had escorted Ye Cheng here grew visibly nervous. She hurried forward, voice trembling. "Your Grace Du, perhaps he—" She glanced anxiously at Ye Cheng, hoping to avert further offense. "He can kneel and apologize." At that, Ye Cheng's brow furrowed. He tensed, ready to spring into action. Before he could move, Duzhong raised a hand, cutting her off. "Enough," he said through clenched teeth, though his voice remained eerily calm. He fixed Ye Cheng with a long, hard look, then turned a cold smile on the red-robed immortal. "No need for apologies. If he refuses to comply, throw him into the well." The red-robed immortal's face went pale, but she dared not disobey. "Yes, Your Grace." Sun Miao snickered as Duzhong's enforcers closed in on Ye Cheng, ready to carry out their master's cruel decree. "I will obey Brother Du's orders." The red-robed golden immortal nodded eagerly. He reached for the forbidden weapon Duzhong had given him earlier, but Duzhong raised a hand to stop him. "There's no need to return what I've entrusted to you," he said. "But—" Duzhong's cold gaze shifted to Ye Cheng. "Since you're so determined to descend into the Chaos Well, I'll lend you my aid." He paused, then added with iron resolve, "Once you help the Xiyu Immortal Dynasty activate their power, well, you will also open the 2 Chaos Wells controlled by my Xiang Immortal Dynasty." The red-robed immortal's face lit up. "Yes, of course, no problem at all." Relief washed over him, and he exhaled softly. Around them, the masters of the 6 great immortal dynasties, and even the immortal experts watching from beyond the meteorite wasteland, fixed their eyes on Ye Cheng. Surviving a single chaos well was considered miraculous. Few emerged unscathed. To conquer one for each dynasty, 3 in total, seemed a death sentence. Even if he lived through the ordeal, the wounds inflicted by those wells would demand a long, arduous healing. Opening a second chaos well, immediately after the first, should have been a one-way ticket to oblivion. The wounds he'd already suffered could have killed him outright, and the Xiang Immortal Dynasty controlled 2 of these wells, meaning that the moment he emerged, another trial would be waiting. According to Duzhong, the odds of surviving 3 wells in a row were less than 1%. Yet when Duzhong voiced his warning, Ye Cheng merely allowed a subtle, unreadable smile to curl at the corner of his lips. He wasn't acting on reckless impulse. This had all been calculated from the start. He understood that each of the 9 Chaos Wells was protected by an ultimate fail-safe. If any were forced open by sheer power, the well would implode. His plan was to outsmart that safeguard rather than smash through it. At precisely that moment, a crimson-robed golden immortal of the Purple Moon Immortal Dynasty stepped forward. With a single graceful gesture, he dispelled the ancient seals binding his dynasty's Chaos Well, and a roaring vortex of blood-red energy flared to life. Without hesitation, Ye Cheng sprang forward and leapt into the heart of the swirling abyss. Instead of plummeting into a simple pit, he found himself hurtling through a vast, boundless corridor of warped space and time, an interdimensional tunnel woven from the raw, unpredictable currents of chaos chi. Around him, reality rippled and bent as streaks of chaotic energy pulsed past, carrying him deeper into the unknown. All around him lay an aura of ancient desolation, as if the very air had turned black with primordial hatred. The chaos energy, so pure and concentrated it seemed almost tangible, ranged toward Ye Cheng in innumerable razor-sharp blades. Yet, unlike ordinary chaos chi, this dark energy refused to meld with his inner world. It offered no shortcuts to the domination realm, no sudden boost in cultivation. Still, each wound the black blades carved left behind a trace of chaos power deep in his flesh. As Ye Cheng absorbed and refined these remnants, he felt his physical strength climb ever higher. A spark of insight lit his eyes. Of course, that was the secret of the Chaos Well. It didn't grant power directly, it reforged the immortal body itself. An immortal's body is like a cup already filled to the brim. No matter how hard you strike, you cannot add more liquid to it. But strike hard enough, and the cup's walls grow tougher, its glass thicker. So too with the Chaos Well. Every cut it inflicted upon Ye Cheng's immortal frame made him stronger than before. The realization settled in his mind with crystalline clarity. Only true suffering could temper invulnerability into absolute might. Chapter 7. The Secret of the Chaos Well. Ye Cheng settled himself in the dim glow of the cavern's heart, his mind turning over everything he'd learned about strengthening the physical body. Under ordinary circumstances, an immortal master's flesh and blood limits can only be elevated one way. At each breakthrough, the surge of cultivation energy shatters their existing vessel, often called the water vessel, and they must reshape it into a larger container capable of holding more chi. That explosive rebirth is the only reliable path to greater physical might. There are, however, rare techniques that bypass the need for a full realm breakthrough. These methods allow an immortal master's body to inch forward without shattering the vessel first. But they're so scarce that most disciples find their physical bodies forever tethered to, at best, their current cultivation level, and only a handful have ever transcended those bounds. The Chaos Well stands among those exceptions. Deep within this ancient pit lingers a residue of chaos yuan qi so potent it seeps into an immortal master's vessel, gently coaxing its walls to expand without the violence of a breakthrough. Its power is subtle, nothing like the explosive gains of realm defiance, but it accumulates. Given enough time and the complete absorption of a single well's yuan qi, even this gradual enlargement can yield astonishing results. Leaning back against the cavern wall, Ye Cheng closed his eyes. He knew the process would be slow, its pace a fraction of what a realm breakthrough offered. Yet when he considered the alternative, waiting for the next major cultivation plunge, risking every drop of hard-won chi in the world-changing instant of shattering his vessel, this method suddenly seemed not just viable, but indispensable. With determination in his heart, he focused on drawing the lingering chaos yuan qi around him into his vessel. Each faint pulse of energy told him he was that much closer to forging a stronger body, one that might one day outpace even his own cultivation. Ye Cheng's eyes lit up with astonishment. He already understood the fundamentals of the Chaos Well, but he had never truly envisioned just how profound its impact on the body could be. Now, as the well's power surged through him, he found himself brimming with eager anticipation. Boom! Focusing every ounce of his strength, Ye Cheng pushed the Yuanqi Tiangong array to its absolute limit. In that instant, his body became a churning vortex, a colossal eye drawing in the inky black chaotic energy from the tunnel. That raw, primordial power surged forward and merged with his flesh and blood. No one could see exactly what was happening deep inside the Chaos Well. If they could, they would have been rendered speechless by the spectacle. Chaos energy not only purged impurities from the body, but also accelerated its metamorphosis with brutal intensity. Without the stabilizing influence of the array talisman, that same energy would tear a cultivator apart. It was precisely to tame this violence that the well digger donned the talisman and placed it into the spring eye. The talisman did more than merely activate the eye. Its carefully woven formation channeled and moderated the chaotic currents, ensuring they could be safely assimilated. Bathed in the cleansed torrent of limitless power, Ye Cheng felt his muscles swell, his bones shift, and his very essence reforming. Every fiber of his being tingled with raw potential as the chaotic energy wove itself into his marrow, unlocking strengths he had never dreamed possible. Eyes gleaming with newfound resolve, Ye Cheng welcomed the transformation. He knew that once the process was complete, he would stand taller, fight harder, and step ever closer to the pinnacle of cultivation he so fiercely sought. Thanks to the predigested qi, the refining process softens the chaos qi's violent edge, making it far easier to absorb and assimilate. Even so, no one in their right mind would dare refine that raw power directly into their body, except Ye Cheng. Most golden immortals avoid direct refinement because their immortal power is too weak to fully support their immortal bodies. The unbridled chaos energy would simply eat them alive. Ye Cheng, however, felt no such fear. Blessed by Yuanxi Tiangong and intertwined with countless fates, his spiritual strength far outstripped that of an ordinary true immortal. As long as his spirit held firm, he could shield his body from disintegration and convert the chaos power into pure strength. In just half a day, his cultivation skyrocketed from Golden Immortal Stage 1 to Stage 3. Under normal circumstances, such progress would demand at least 10,000 years of toil, yet for Ye Cheng, it came as effortlessly as breathing. Even Ye Cheng would have needed a century of relentless effort to reach this point. Yet now, in just half a day, he'd advanced to this stage. The improvement in the Chaos Well was unmistakable. Chapter 7:18. One day later, deep within the Chaos Well, Ye Cheng sat cross-legged at the bottom of the well, his palms resting lightly on a white jade talisman inscribed with an array of divine runes. The talisman, bestowed on him by the Purple Moon Immortal Dynasty, had channeled every last particle of Chaos Yuan Qi from the spring above. 1,000,000 years' worth of primal energy surged through Ye Cheng's body, refining his flesh and bones until, in a single bound, he broke through to the 7th level of the Golden Immortal realm. His ascent, however, came with a price. Each new rung on the immortal ladder demanded exponentially more Chaos Yuan Qi, and the well he'd just emptied had supplied only a fraction of what he would need in the future. Yet Ye Cheng felt no anxiety. He knew of 2 more Chaos Wells waiting just beyond these cavern walls, and if fortune smiled on him, he might discover even more. As the afterglow of power faded, Ye Cheng rose and brushed dust from his robes. He lifted the jade talisman, its runes extinguished now that its energy was spent. With a casual thought, he prepared to slip back through the well's secret passage, and that was when he first became aware of the change. Where once stood the slender form of a cultivator in mid-transformation, he now saw a man wholly reborn. Taller, broader-shouldered, his features sharpened by the current of golden immortal power that still pulsed through his veins. His eyes, once bright with youthful ambition, now gleamed with the calm resolve of one who had claimed the legacies of the ancients. Ye Cheng straightened his back, tested a few steps, and allowed himself a faint, satisfied smile. The first well was conquered. 2 more lay ahead. And beyond that, who could say how many more reservoirs of Chaos Yuan Qi awaited a daring soul with the skill to seize them? With that prospect in mind, he pressed forward, disappearing into the subterranean corridor, ready to harvest the next well and ascend still higher on the immortal's path. Ye Cheng staggered out of the ancient well, every step trembling as if his bones might shatter. His robes were torn, his face pale, and fresh wounds crisscrossed his arms and chest. The gathered cultivators exchanged glances of pity and resignation. No one doubted that he had the talent to test his mettle in the 10,000 Dynasties arena. After all, he was one of the last scions of the fallen immortal dynasty, but talent alone could not save him now that he'd earned Duzhong's enmity. From the edge of the clearing, Duzhong's lips curled into a cold smile. He strode forward without a word of mercy, raising his hand in a commanding gesture. "Activate both Chaos Wells," he ordered. Instantly, the 2 swirling vortexes of raw Chaos Qi under the Ziyang Immortal Dynasty's control flared to life. At Duzhong's side, the red-robed elder of the Purple Moon Immortal Dynasty barely spared Ye Cheng a glance. In the elder's eyes, Ye Cheng was already as good as dead. His final breath would come at Duzhong's whim. Without hesitation, the elder turned away and beckoned his own disciples toward the well that Ye Cheng had just emptied. They arrived to find the well's depths utterly barren. Every last ounce of Chaos Qi had been siphoned off in Ye Cheng's desperate attempt to escape. There was nothing left for them to harvest or to study. But the elder merely nodded, as if he had expected no less, and signaled for the seals that would finalize Ye Cheng's doom. All around them, the charged air crackled with unleashed power. With two wells now fully awakened, Duzhong's assault was about to begin, and Ye Cheng, still struggling to stay upright, was trapped with no hope of rescue. Ye Cheng didn't linger over the spring more than necessary. Reactivating a chaos well after embedding the formation was notoriously slow. Sometimes it could take half a month before even a trace of qi reappeared. That's exactly why he'd siphoned off every scrap of energy the first time, and why he would do it again. Ignoring the red-robed golden immortal who watched him with narrowed eyes, Ye Cheng flickered out of sight and plunged into the second chaos well. Unlike his first attempt, this one took barely a day. Having already experienced the turbulent flow and now wielding a 7th-level golden immortal body, he absorbed and refined the well's raw vitality at astonishing speed. The moment he emerged, a surge of power rippled through him. He'd advanced from the 7th to the 9th level of the golden immortal realm in a single bound. Without hesitation, Ye Cheng stepped into the 3rd chaos well. A day and a night passed in the whirl of chaotic energy. When he finally surfaced, his entire being glowed with a transcendent light. The final bottleneck shattered, and his cultivation leaped beyond the golden immortal stage. Ye Cheng had ascended at last. He was now a true immortal, although he's only a master just below the first rung of true immortal rank. Ye Cheng's gaze drifted across the desolate meteorite wasteland. 9 chaos wells lay buried beneath its cracked earth, and so far he'd only fully refined 3. If he could tap all 9, his body would undergo a truly fearsome transformation. The thought both exhilarated and drained him. Already, his breath came in ragged gasps. In truth, he was spent. His once pristine white robes hung in tatters, his shoulders stooped, every movement an effort. Yet even in this battered state, he retained an almost ethereal bearing. A handful of female cultivators from the 6 great fairy dynasties, and even those who'd ventured in from beyond, covered their mouths in awe, their eyes alight with both admiration and desire. But Duzhong Jingxian of the Xiang fairy dynasty saw only an enemy who, despite his ruinous appearance, still clung to life. His face twisted in contempt as he ground his teeth, sweeping a frost-cold glance over the assembled representatives of the other 5 dynasties. "Are you still so short on manpower that you need more hands just to bore another well?" he sneered. "Then use him if you need more hands." At Duzhong's curt command, the assembled immortal masters surrounding the meteorite wasteland turned in shock and dismay toward Ye Cheng. They had long foreseen that the young cultivator's fate would be grim the moment he refused Duzhong's offer, but to sentence him to a 4th descent into the chaos well? Even these hardened figures gulped in horror. This man must not be crossed." One master whispered urgently to his neighbor, fear etched in his features. Duzhong merely smirked, his arrogance growing. He swept a gaze across the leaders of the other 4 immortal dynasties. "And you? Any objections?" Silence fell for a heartbeat before the master of the Queshan immortal dynasty stepped forward. He bowed slightly, then spoke with measured calm. "We have no quarrel with your proposal, provided that we recover the forbidden weapon." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The leader of the Mo Yue immortal dynasty cast a cool glance at Ye Cheng, who remained resolute, though his face was drawn and pale, and then inclined his head in assent. Duzhong's grin widened. Free labor, at no cost, and the chance to salvage a priceless artifact into the bargain. With the other dynastic masters reluctantly on board, there was nothing left to stall him. Ye Cheng's grim trial by the Chaos Well would proceed. Only the Linglong immortal dynasty's matriarch shook her head, her eyes softening with a hint of sympathy as they settled on Ye Cheng. "No," she said quietly, "he's no use to us. He need not attend." Duzhong's jaw clenched at her refusal. Yet he dared not argue. Golden immortal Qing Kui, the dynasty's crown jewel and personal disciple of its sovereign, stood beside her with equal rank and greater cultivation. Despite his simmering resentment, he swallowed his anger. After all, Linglong held only 1 chaos well in this stretch of the meteorite wasteland. Relinquishing it would hardly derail Ye Cheng's prospects. Before he could protest, however, Sun Miao, the golden immortal of the Xidian Immortal dynasty and Duzhong's long-standing rival, stepped forward and spoke. Sun Miao didn't speak to Duzhong. Instead, he fixed his gaze on Ye Cheng, wonder brightening his eyes. I never expected you to survive 3 Chaos Wells, he admitted. Impressive. He stepped forward, offering a single chance. Submit to me now, and I'll guarantee your safety. Later, you'll have every opportunity to avenge Duzhong. What do you say? Will you join me? The temptation was almost irresistible. The Chaos Divine Mountain was on the verge of formation, and with its birth came an innate suppression aura. Even a true immortal's power would be reduced to that of a perfect celestial immortal within its confines. In that arena, cultivation meant nothing. Only raw physical strength and inherent talent decided who would triumph. A prodigy like Ye Cheng, having just proven he could survive 3 Chaos Wells, would dominate. Sun Miao had underestimated him until now, and he was determined not to let such talent slip away. But Ye Cheng merely smiled, cool, unreadable. Sun Miao's face darkened in an instant. Very well, Sun Miao ground his teeth and turned to Duzhong. From now on, the 2 Chaos Wells of the Purple Lightning Immortal Dynasty belong entirely to him. He goes first. Agreed, Duzhong replied. He had feared Sun Miao might claim Ye Cheng outright, perhaps even kill him to prevent any complications in the struggle for Chaos Mountain. When Ye Cheng had boldly refused Sun Miao's overtures, Duzhong had secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Now, with Sun Miao's blessing, there was no reason to object. Under the watchful eyes of the gathered masters, they lowered Ye Cheng into the 4th Chaos Well. Then the 5th, the 6th, the 7th. Each descent drew eager anticipation and silent bets on whether he would survive the trial. As the hours passed, however, skepticism turned to astonishment. One by one, all 7 wells were conquered, and each time, Ye Cheng crawled back out, shaken and bloodied but unbowed. His robes were torn and dust-choked, his body trembling on the edge of collapse, yet his gaze remained unyielding. When he finally emerged from the 7th well, brushing grime from his face, every onlooker fell silent. Before them stood a man who had faced 7 trials of death and survived them all. Ye Cheng, battered but unbeaten, a living testament to unbreakable will. A tense hush fell over the gathered immortals. Though each of them ranked a full cultivation level above Ye Cheng, none could disguise the flicker of fear in their eyes. For a moment, it had looked as though he might succeed where countless others had failed. Then, as Ye Cheng plunged into the yawning 8th Chaos Well, his aura, so vibrant and unshakable only moments before, suddenly extinguished. No more breath, someone whispered. He's finally gone, another breathed, relief flooding their voice. What a shame, said Sun Miao, his tone surprisingly regretful. 7 Chaos Wells in a row, who else could claim such a feat? Duzhong and the golden-robed immortal exchanged glances. The other 2 masters at their side, each renowned in their own right, nodded solemnly. All 5 had watched Ye Cheng's progress with hawkish scrutiny, expecting to see his demise. Yet none could deny the pity that now stirred in their hearts. Outside the meteorite wasteland, a larger assembly of immortals had congregated, drawn by rumors of some prodigy on the brink of a breakthrough. They, too, sank into quiet disappointment. To open 7 consecutive Chaos Wells was an accomplishment that would have resounded across all 3,000 Dao continents had he survived. Alas, the strong are fragile, an elder sighed, shaking his head. This genius, he was too bold for his own good. Murmurs of pity and regret rippled through the crowd, but no one dared step forward. Ye Cheng's final act remained sealed in that bottomless well, his fate known only to the void. Chapter 8. The 8th Chaos Well. A sudden blast of bone-chilling cold poured forth from the well, stealing the breath from every onlooker's lungs. What is that? Someone gasped. The gathered immortal masters exchanged alarmed glances. These were no ordinary spectators. They were the greatest cultivators from the 6 immortal dynasties of the meteorite wasteland, each one a formidable figure in their own right. Now they all fell silent, staring in frozen shock at the source of that terrifying aura. Stepping forward atop a drifting cloud was Ye Cheng, the man they had all believed dead, the one whose return was thought impossible. His presence was as majestic and awe-inspiring as ever, yet something was undeniably wrong. Scorch marks seared the hem of his robes, and his posture wavered. His normally radiant aura flickered weakly, as though a great wound had sapped his strength. Fear and disbelief washed over the assembled masters. Ye Cheng's resurrection alone defied every rule of cultivation, but to see him broken, injured, and vulnerable sent a ripple of dread through every immortal heart. What calamity had he faced within the depths of the 8th Chaos Well, and what price had he paid for this miraculous return? Chapter 719. This youth has surprising strength. After me. Kill him. The instant Ye Cheng burst free from the Chaos Well, Du Zhong, the golden immortal leader of the Ziyang immortal dynasty, let out a thundering roar and struck. His vast immortal power coalesced into a colossal hand of divine light that blotted out sun and sky, aimed squarely at crushing Ye Cheng to powder. This was no ordinary technique, but a famed Chaos Dao assassination method recorded only in true immortal handbooks. Even among the Du family's perfected golden immortal elders, few could execute it flawlessly. Yet Du Zhong, still merely a third-level golden immortal, unleashed it without a hint of hesitation. As his immense hand bore down, the surrounding immortal Dao Yuan Qi and the chaotic laws of heaven and earth swirled in concert with him, intensifying the onslaught against Ye Cheng. Even a cultivator who had reached the perfect golden immortal realm would blanch under such an assault, let alone Ye Cheng, whose own cultivation scarcely qualified him beyond a low-rank immortal. Yet Du Zhong had anticipated this. He opened 8 Chaos Wells in swift succession, and not a single one had been damaged. Only a fool would mistake Ye Cheng for some ordinary novice, so the moment Du Zhong struck, he called upon the surrounding immortals to join the onslaught. At his signal, the masters of the Purple Moon Immortal Dynasty and champions from 4 other great dynasties unleashed their full immortal power at once. Above the expanse of the meteoric dragon wasteland, divine clouds coalesced into blinding light. A crushing killing aura swirled into a colossal vortex that bore down on Ye Cheng, as if determined to tear him limb from limb. Beyond the borders of the wasteland, every immortal observer stood agape. Not a soul dared speak, yet the thought on every lip was the same. Can he possibly survive this? How could he survive? The 5 great immortal dynasties had united their might, unleashing a killing aura so overwhelming that even a golden immortal on the verge of perfection would hesitate, let alone Ye Cheng. And yet, against all odds, he had emerged alive from the dreaded 8 Chaos Wells. A hush fell over the assembled immortal masters. They trembled, whispering in disbelief. The only faction in the meteoric dragon wasteland that had yet to strike was the Linglong Immortal Dynasty. Its masters, among them their leader, the legendary Green Bird Golden Immortal, stood motionless, holding their breath. No one dared speak aloud. All eyes were fixed on the churning vortex where Ye Cheng's figure had disappeared. In that swirling maelstrom of power, a faint divine light danced across their faces, an unmistakable mixture of reverence and awe. Dead or alive, they all understood this much. After today, the descendants of their ruined dynasty would be spoken of throughout the western regions of the 10,000 dynasties battlefield. Then, just as the tension reached its peak, boom, the vortex erupted in a deafening roar, its storm of killing energy drawing every eye in the land. Ye Cheng's entire being flared with a blinding, divine radiance as he stood at the heart of the whirling storm of destructive energy. Like some fabled war immortal returned to the mortal world, he didn't draw a sword. Instead, he simply swept out one mighty palm strike. In an instant, the churning vortex of lethal force ground to a halt. Before anyone could react, his fist shot forward again, and the combined onslaught of dozens of masters from the 5 great immortal dynasties shattered, dissolving into nothingness beneath the sheer power of his blow. What? Du Zhong, Sun Miao, and the other supreme leaders of the 5 great immortal dynasties staggered back, faces drained of color. When their eyes met Ye Cheng's steady gaze, each of them felt a chill of utter dread. They swallowed hard, but rather than retreat, they roared in unison and lunged forward with renewed ferocity. Escape was no longer an option. Every one of them knew that flying from Ye Cheng would only seal their doom. If they were to die, it would be fighting him head-on in one final, desperate gamble. Die for me! Du Zhong bellowed, his arrogance stripped away by fear and hatred. His features twisted into a grotesque mask as he hurled himself toward Ye Cheng, intent on vengeance. Around him, the other leaders mirrored his reckless charge, each bearing the grim resolve of warriors who, knowing death awaited them either way, refused to back down. In that moment, The battlefield fell silent, save for the thundering footsteps of 10 masters hurtling toward a single, unmoving figure bathed in divine light. The air itself seemed to shudder as destinies collided under the shadow of inevitable fate. Ye Cheng let out a thunderous roar as he unleashed his ultimate trump card, a forbidden weapon known as the Broken Sword. A handful of onlooking immortal masters gasped in recognition. This was no ordinary blade, but a remnant of a fallen immortal dynasty, a treasure once wielded on the field of 10,000 dynasties by the dynasty's last scion. Legend told that the heir had even wounded a true immortal with it before their house was swept into oblivion. The shattered sword was claimed as a trophy by that victorious true immortal and entrusted to Duzhong's care. Now, at Duzhong's command, the broken sword blazed with rekindled power. As his divine energy poured into it, the fragmented steel began to knit itself whole once more. Then, in a chilling spectacle, countless tortured souls spiraled out from the blade's core, shrill wails echoing across the battlefield. These resentful spirits coalesced into an ever-expanding vortex of torment, their anguish feeding the sword's unearthly might. From one side of the vortex, gale-force winds surged toward Ye Cheng, whipping up debris and threatening to drown him in a whirlwind of bone-chilling cold. Yet he stood unmoving, eyes blazing as he braced himself against the onslaught. On the opposite flank, Sun Miao, clad in flowing scarlet robes, and a cadre of venerable elders drew their own forbidden armaments. Each weapon pulsed with taboo energy, ready to be unleashed in a synchronized strike. In that moment, the battlefield crackled with raw, unmitigated power. Between the spiraling souls of the broken sword and the forbidden weapons of the red-robed sect, Ye Cheng and his allies found themselves at the very heart of a tempest wrought by ancient vendettas, and neither mercy nor quarter would be given. Although these forbidden weapons weren't as formidable as Duzhong himself, each could fell a perfect golden immortal. Coupled with the shattered fragments of Duzhong's sword, they coalesced into an assault far more devastating than the earlier death vortex, hurtling directly at Ye Cheng. Yet Ye Cheng's expression never wavered. His eyes remained cold and unreadable as he drawled, "Pathetic." Tempered by the 8 chaos wells until his body reached its utmost limit, Ye Cheng no longer needed spiritual power, the great Tao, or even his inner world. His raw physical strength alone rivaled that of a 7th-level true immortal. In fact, had he not relied on the Yuanxi killing formation before, he could have dispatched his adversary with a single blow. Faced with such overwhelming might, Duzhong's forbidden weapons, and all his allies' tricks, meant nothing. Ye Cheng met the onslaught with absolute contempt. Ye Cheng charged headlong into the enemy ranks, his eyes blazing with unbridled fury. In a single motion, he thrust up his arm and shattered the sacrificial blade Duzhong had planted before him. Then, with a powerful downward stomp, he drove the blade's remnants into the ground, and sent Duzhong and the Xiang Immortal Dynasty cultivators arrayed behind him flying apart in a crimson mist. Before anyone could react, Ye Cheng spun on his heel and unleashed a second blow. His fist connected with Sun Miao's chest, obliterating her and the Xidian Immortal Dynasty masters at her side into nothing but gore. One punch, one palm strike after another, his fists and open hands rose and fell with unerring precision, while his legs lashed out like living whips. In moments, the vast meteorite wasteland fell deathly silent, the air heavy with the echo of shattering bone and suppressed terror. Every warrior there, the famed powerhouses of the western region's 10,000 dynasties battlefield, stood frozen, eyes wide in disbelief. Against Ye Cheng's staggering might, they were no more than ants under a boot. And just as abruptly as his assault had begun, he drew to a halt. He lifted his head, lungs swelling, and unleashed a roar that ripped through the void like rolling thunder. The ground trembled beneath them. Even the jagged fields of the meteorite dragon wasteland seemed on the verge of fracturing under his wrath. With a final, earth-shaking roar, Ye Cheng unleashed a surge of power that shattered the last of the 5 immortal dynasties' masters. Their immortal bodies buckled and collapsed under the onslaught. None could withstand his might. Silence fell over the meteorite dragon wasteland. Survivors from Linglong Xianxia, along with countless immortal observers drawn by the clash, stared in stunned disbelief as the dust settled. It was as if they'd awoken from a dream to find the battlefield completely empty, save for Ye Cheng, who simply turned and walked away without so much as a backward glance. In that frozen moment, everyone realized that nothing would ever be the same in the western reaches of the Wanchao battlefield. The tremors of today's cataclysm would echo far beyond this barren plain. High atop a jagged overlook, Qingque Jingxian, the venerable leader of Linglong Xianxia, watched Ye Cheng's retreating silhouette. Thoughts raced through his mind. Should they quietly withdraw from the coming contest for the Chaos God Mountain, newly born from the chaos? Or press on, staking their claim against all rivals? The weight of that choice pressed down on him harder than any enemy's strike. Facing someone as formidable as Ye Cheng, she had no confidence in her chances of winning the upcoming contest to claim ownership of Chaos God Mountain. Chapter 720. 3 days later, deep in a secluded valley on the western front of the Wanchao battlefield, Ye Cheng opened his eyes and pushed himself to his feet. A cold gleam shone in his gaze. Over these past 3 days, he had fully acclimated to his transformed body, and his combat prowess had soared. Though his cultivation level remained the same, he knew that even a 7th-level true immortal now posed him no real threat. He could fell such an opponent with a single strike. Ye Cheng allowed himself a wry smile. No wonder the competition in these chaos treasure lands was so fierce. Thanks to the Yuanxi Tiangong technique, most immortal cultivators must rely on realm breakthroughs to augment their bodies. But Ye Cheng had taken a different path. By meticulously refining his physique, he had strengthened every sinew and bone, turning his body into a living weapon. Under normal circumstances, advancing from the first tier of Golden Immortal all the way to the 7th tier of True Immortal would cost tens of thousands of years. Yet in less than 10 days, he had shattered that timeline. He flexed his arms and legs, feeling raw power ripple through every fiber of his being. Although his realm marker on the immortal chart remained unchanged, his overall might had leapt forward by several levels. On a battlefield teeming with deadly relics and rival cultivators, that edge could mean the difference between life and death. Rising from the valley floor, Ye Cheng cast a glance toward the distant clash of armies. The air crackled with sword chi and arcane murmurs, a reminder that his trials here were far from over. With renewed confidence, he strode out to rejoin the fray. Ye Cheng gazed out from the valley toward the northwest, where a magnificent city rose from the plains some 3,000 miles away. That city was his destination. My progress through the Chaos Well has reached its limit, he murmured. Even if I discover more wells, my body can't advance any further. But the vast battlefield of the 10,000 dynasties offered more than just Chaos Wells. Scattered across its war-torn landscape were countless Chaos treasure lands, each a potential gateway to new power. Chief among them was the legendary Chaos Heavenly Pond. The Chaos Heavenly Pond was renowned as the supreme crucible for immortal weapon crafting. An ordinary immortal weapon cast into its depths would undergo a profound metamorphosis, emerging far stronger than before, and at its zenith, even weapons of true immortal caliber could be forged. Yet, like the wells, these heavenly ponds were fiercely protected by impenetrable formations. Not even someone of Ye Cheng's strength could simply force his way inside. On top of that, his exploits in the meteoric dragon wasteland had already spread his name throughout the western region of the battlefield. Any move he made now would be watched closely. Still, Ye Cheng knew that if he wished to break through his current plateau, he would have to find a way into one of those guarded Chaos Heavenly Ponds and claim its power for himself. Ye Cheng knew that trying to slip into an immortal dynasty strike team bound for the meteoric dragon wasteland would be a suicide mission. Even under a perfect disguise, the dynasty's veterans, fully aware of the stake at hand, would inspect every newcomer to the last hair. They wouldn't give him a single chance to move undetected. Yet Ye Cheng hadn't banked on sheer luck. He'd counted on a crucial difference between the Chaos Wells and the Chaos Heavenly Ponds. In a Chaos Well, raw Chaos Yuan Qi could only be refined in place, its power bound to the well's immediate vicinity. The Chaos Heavenly Ponds, by contrast, produced a concentrated Chaos Divine liquid, once used to purify immortal soldiers, that could be drained, bottled, and transported freely. All 5 of these legendary ponds had been tapped over the last million years, their collective yields stored in Qingming City, the nearest supply base to the Xiang Immortal dynasty. That was Ye Cheng's true target. Under the cover of the meteor showers that perpetually rained down on the wasteland, he struck. Utilizing spirit-sealing formations and deceptive illusions, he forced wavering dynasty scouts into traps and stole their supply caravans. By the time he made his retreat, Ye Cheng had secured hundreds of jade-like vials of Chaos Divine liquid, along with a trove of rare spirit stones and battle-forged relics. His haul from the meteoric dragon wasteland was not only substantial, it was enough to redraw the balance of power around the Xiang Immortal dynasty. This latest breakthrough was more than just a surge in Ye Cheng's cultivation. He had also harvested priceless intelligence on the 10,000 dynasties' conflict zones. By killing the masters of the 5 great immortal dynasties, Ziwei, Xiang, Zidian, and the other 2, and probing their souls, he absorbed their memories. Now he possessed a crystal-clear picture of troop deployments, resource caches, secret passages, and critical strongholds. In particular, he learned everything he needed to know about Qingming City. It was Ye Cheng who tracked down and captured the residual spirit of Duzhong Jinxian, the fallen prodigy of the Xiang Immortal dynasty, and extracted from him the final, hidden reports. According to those recovered memories, Qingming City still harbored over 300 kilograms of Chaos Divine liquid. 300 kilograms of this substance was hardly a commonplace supply. It was pure, undiluted wealth. Even at a price of 100 billion immortal crystals per kilogram, Chaos Divine liquid was virtually impossible to acquire in bulk. Converted into yuan crystals, it would amount to well over 100. 300 kilograms at that rate, even a true immortal would go insane with envy. Not to mention 300 pounds. Even a mere 100 pounds of Chaos Divine liquid is more than enough to temper a true immortal-grade weapon. Upgrading my Yuanxi killing formation and the 4-layer killing sword will demand materials far beyond those required by an ordinary immortal weapon of the same rank. But with over 300 pounds of Chaos Divine liquid at my disposal, I can elevate the Yuanxi killing formation straight to the pinnacle of the Golden Immortal realm. With that resolve, Ye Cheng summoned his cultivation, body blazing with light, and shot off toward Qingming City. Qingming City lay under a shroud of tension. As one of the Xiang Immortal dynasty's foremost strongholds on the Wanchao battlefield, it was perpetually garrisoned by more than 5 Golden Immortals, and guarded by a grand protective formation, woven by the true immortal ancestor himself. Every street and courtyard thrummed with martial power, ready to spring into action at the first hint of danger. Ye Cheng sensed that, once he arrived, his greatest trials and greatest opportunities would await him here. Even a true immortal-level warrior cannot breach Qingming City's defenses unless his cultivation surpasses that of the true immortal Three Heavens ancestor who laid down the protective formation of the Xiang Immortal dynasty. No matter how fierce the fighting on the plains of Wanchao, within these walls, no one dares act recklessly. As a result, Qingming City maintains an almost uncanny calm. Victorious cultivators from rival sects and dynasties often come here to trade their war spoils, confident that the city's impregnable ward will protect them. Yet today, every master, whether sworn to the Xiang Immortal dynasty or hailing from elsewhere, stands silently on guard, unwilling to make a single move. The reason is simple and dreadful. 3 days ago, the city's lord, an unrivaled Golden Immortal perfection, lost his only son in the meteorite dragon wasteland. Mourning and fury now grip his heart. No one here doubts that any offense, however minor, could unleash his wrath. So the streets of Qingming City lie hushed, and even the wind seems to pause, as all who dwell within hold their breath beneath the shadow of the bereaved lord. Ye Cheng's pedigree was nothing to scoff at. He was a direct scion of the Du family, the second most powerful clan in the entire Xiang Immortal dynasty. Admittedly, Ye Cheng himself lacked the extraordinary talent to draw his sword and astonish his peers. But his branch had a trump card, his cousin, Duzhong. A prodigy from birth, Duzhong ranked among the top 3 of his generation, and in a family famed for its gifted heirs, that distinction meant everything. So long as Duzhong lived, Ye Cheng's standing in the clan would only climb, and no relative could ever hope to suppress him. But now Duzhong was dead, struck down in the once safe meteorite dragon wasteland, a place so secure that it had become a training ground for declining sects. He had instead become a grim stepping stone for those daring enough to prey on a weakening dynasty. Inside the Lord's mansion of Qingming City, Ye Cheng's fury boiled over. He paced before his trembling subordinates, voice echoing through the grand hall. 3 days, he roared, slamming a palm onto the carved wooden table. 3 days have passed since we learned Duzhong was murdered, and you, worthless lot, still haven't uncovered a single clue to the killer's identity. City Lord Dushang's eyes were bloodshot, and his face twisted with fury. Before him, the 4 golden immortal masters who served under him stood with bowed heads, not daring to utter a word. Though Duzhong had fallen and his own position teetered on the brink, Dushang still held the prestige of being the direct descendant of the Du family, an authority they could never match. Even if their cultivation ranks higher than his, none of them dared to speak back or meet his wrathful gaze. Out! Go on with the search, he snarled. With a collective bow, the 4 masters slipped from the hall, their footsteps echoing down the corridor. Dushang watched them go, every muscle tense with anger. He knew, however, that losing his temper further would achieve nothing, so he ground his teeth and forced himself to remain seated. No sooner had the last of the 4 disappeared than a clatter of hurried footsteps sounded outside the mansion gates. A 5th immortal master burst in, bowed deeply, and reported in a breathless rush. City Lord, we've just received word. There's urgent news. Someone's discovered that the surviving lineage of the fallen immortal dynasty most likely hails from the Dragon Phoenix immortal dynasty. Dushang's brow furrowed at the name. Dragon Phoenix immortal dynasty, its glory dated back 10 eras, tens of millions of years ago, yet his eyes gleamed with excitement. No matter how long ago it was, any lead could point the Du family to their hidden descendants. Have you forwarded this to the master? It's already been sent. He replied that they're investigating and expect concrete intelligence within a few months at most. Excellent. Keep at it. The master is collecting information beyond our borders, so don't dare slack off on Wanchao's front lines. Dushang let out a pleased laugh and immediately ordered his officers to press the inquiry further. He turned to the messenger who'd delivered the news. Well done, he praised, awarding him a squad of golden immortal guards as a reward. The young man beamed, sank to one knee in gratitude, then withdrew. Dushang leaned back, murmuring to himself, Dragon Phoenix Immortal Dynasty, this could change everything. With that, he resumed issuing orders and reorganizing his forces. Ye Cheng's chest tightened with grim resolve. After weeks of dead ends, he'd finally uncovered a solid lead on his son's murderer. At his side, Dushang allowed himself a rare, relieved smile. He was just about to suggest they take a brief respite when the earth beneath Qingming City shuddered with a thunderous boom. Instantly, every immortal cultivator within the walls leapt to their feet, eyes wide as they scanned the horizon. Dushang raced to the ramparts, heart pounding. Beyond the city's gates, a monstrous pressure, like the weight of a collapsing mountain, pressed down on the land. Who dares to challenge Qingming City so brazenly? Dushang exclaimed, voice echoing against the ramparts. Around him, seasoned masters tightened their grips on sword hilts, ready to confront whatever force dared stand against them. The next moment would decide whether their stronghold would hold or fall under this unprecedented onslaught.